I got 6:30, so we'll call the meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Redo it. All right, do we have any additions to the agenda tonight, Maggie?
I do not have any additions, just a request to move a couple items.
Okay.
Do you want me to mention this? Okay, so we would move F, Fire Department, up above A, Personnel, and then we would move C3, Text Amendment to Ordinance 215, Land Usage Ordinance 223, to C1, and then the comprehensive plan would then become 2, and the comprehensive plan grant would become 3.
Okay.
Wow. Where's fire department purchase going?
It's going to go up in front of A.
All right, I'll look for a motion to approve the agenda with those two changes.
I'll make that motion.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion, a second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. All right, now we'll open up for public comments. If there's anyone who would like to discuss anything that's not on the agenda tonight, please come forward. Seeing none, we'll close public comments and we'll move to the consent agenda. Anything on the consent agenda that we need to remove for further discussion?
Just got a question about something. Kellogg Environmental Services, what's that MKM meeting?
Oh, I don't have the invoices. Is that with you, Mark? Okay, so I don't have it in front of me. Do you know offhand? So we've had a meeting for multiple reasons. We've had some meetings with regards to our wetland, but then also Greg Hazy's property. So let me just look.
It says MKM meeting, site visit, notice of application. Is that all for Greg Hazy?
Yes.
Okay, so then does he get charged that back? Or is that a city charge?
For that, I don't know if we collected any escrow for that application. We can look into that a little bit more.
And then I just wanna know if, Ratwick, Rozak, Maloney, if we get a breakdown of what those are, you know how it's
Yeah, I
an
can
engineer
email
breakdown.
those to you. I can email
Okay.
those to you. We do
Thank
get a
you.
breakdown.
Thank you.
Any other items? If we could, I'd like to take G, Minnesota Service Cleaning Contract, and remove that for further discussion, just to get clarification, make sure I understand where we're at with that. So we'll move that to the regular agenda as G1 for Minnesota Service Cleaning Contract.
Okay.
Anything else on the consent? I'll look for a motion to approve the consent agenda, except for the Minnesota Service Clean Contract, which has been removed for further discussion.
And then before we head in, oh, sorry, did you vote?
Yeah, we need a motion.
Sorry.
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Motion carries.
And then, just before we head into the other items, we do have, Gary Selke here. I know there's just been some questions that the council has, and I know Gary had some questions too about kind of, what's going on around town with regards to enforcement, so I don't know if you wanna get up and...
Yeah, that could be, yeah.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I'm not in uniform, but I was off at 2 o'clock today. We've been dealing with a lot of parking complaints. What I'm finding is either people aren't transferring their title or they're not from around here. And through a few phone calls, we're able to get the vehicles moved, except for one we're still working on. And I just wanna make sure that if I am able to ticket and tow, that I get the full backing from the council to do that, because I'm sure problems will arise, who pays for it, because the boat and trailer isn't listed, who's parking it, so that person is responsible. But if we tow it, it goes in the owner's name, so it sits over there, so then he's gonna have to, he might say that because it was a business taking care of it, that he's not responsible, and I don't know how you're gonna get R&V involved, or who pays the tow bill. But that's something you might wanna look for down the road, as far as, you might get some backlash if we do ticket and tow. But for all the other stuff, it's a couple phone calls, give them a couple days or so, and people seem to either not know the ordinance, or they're taking care of it. Plus, we have a glitch on the county side. They're going through all the city ordinances, taking ordinances out that don't pertain and adding new ones in. But along with that, that has to get approved by the county commissioner and then by the county attorney. So that's a whole mess later down the road that I'm not able to write tickets for the 24-hour parking right now because it's not in our system.
Okay.
The other thing is, I know it's Labor Day, but you might want to start thinking about snowfall. I know the signs is 1-inch snowfall. I know other cities have it from November 1st or till April 1st, no on-street parking at all. And what they typically do is a couple of weeks before, if there's cars parked on the street, we go ahead and put warning tickets on everybody's cars that's parked out there, and we normally don't ticket until the first snowfall. The problem is I've seen people that have gone to court, and they've gone to the National Weather Service saying that it didn't snow 1 inch in my town or whatever, and they still got a ticket. But that also goes with the blowing. We got some big winds, and I know even in April, the streets might be plowed, but they get blown over, and there's, the plows have to go through, and I know you guys contract with somebody to do the plowing, correct?
Yep.
So if you have to have them keep coming out, but I think you might want to look at that ordinance and make it a strictly no on-street parking from the hours of, 10 until 6 in the morning or something. And there's ways that we've done it before where people can call up the sheriff's office and say, hey, I'm having a party tonight. Can I park on the street? I might have 5 or 6 vehicles.
Yeah.
We give them the okay to say, yeah, that's fine. Give us your address, and we don't do anything. But at least I think it's a better route than the 1-inch snowfall, and it's just going to help out the public works people. That's something to think about here, too, coming up.
That's good. We can take that to Public Works, that recommendation. Certainly discuss it there.
Other than that, as far as all the other calls in town, it's been fairly quiet the last month or two.
Okay.
So,
Good.
unless you guys have anything for me.
Good. I don't think we have anything now. I don't. If anyone else has anything for Gary, so we'll,
I do, if
Go
that's
ahead.
okay.
Yep.
I was looking at the report and I was noticing, that there's quite a few traffic stops,
Mm-hmm.
and they've all been warnings. Is that correct for speeding?
Yep.
Okay. And where are those happening at?
Most of them are coming into town, right in front of Mayor Lumber there. I hit
Okay.
that pretty hard, because that changed from a 40 to a 30, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's also coming in town from New Germany. That whole stretch is 45.
Right.
People are still going 52, 53, somewhere up to 55. So I'm hitting those two areas pretty hard.
At what point do we start giving out tickets?
It depends. It's usually up to the officer. Some people have a kind of a limit over speed, Some people take a look at their driving record. If it looks like, they're 6 miles over, but they haven't learned their lesson because they have 8 speeds, they'll get a ticket before somebody who's going 10 miles and over and with no violation. So it's usually officer discretion. It's more of an educational.
Okay.
Those are usually the 2 spots that I've been hitting pretty hard.
Because I think I've been seeing you on the north side of town too, and I was just kind of wondering, is there a
Well,
lot of speed happening?
We did have,
there?
I don't know if it came into the office, maybe it didn't, but I know somebody out there by the cemetery says between 4 and 6 o'clock, cars are going 75 miles an hour heading out of town towards Highway 7. I have never seen that. I think the highest I maybe had is like a 57, and it's 50 there. So, I don't think you can really gain that much speed unless it was a one-time incident. So that's why I've been kind of sitting out there too, to make that person show that I'm out there, but I don't see it as a problem. They do, and I know we had some discussion, I know you had it in your crosswalk, how we talked about, you know, those strips that go across the road where how many vehicles go through there, and it tracks the speed without having a speed trailer. That might be something you can do too, to see how fast cars are going and how many vehicles, without people noticing it.
County still has that speed, the
I
speed trailer?
believe we do. That would be a question I'd have to ask.
You let,
Sure. Yep. I can find out.
Anything else?
as it pertains to needing to tow a vehicle, we have all of the trust in your experience and your judgment. I would say if it needs to go, it needs to go.
Okay.
I support Janet.
I'm looking at other options too, as far as it not being registered, up to date, stuff like that. I just wanna make sure that if we get a backlash, that they come back to me and I'm just saying, hey, I'm just doing my job, following city ordinances, and then after they get through yelling at me, they're gonna come to you, and so as you guys as well know that, hey, we give him full authority, if you're breaking the rule and needs to be towed, it's towed, and they
Some
can
of that,
go to
I
court
think
and
we
fight.
should have a good discussion on that, but I think we need it as an agenda item instead of now just making those discussions. I think we have to give the public the opportunity to see it's an agenda item and come in and speak to it also, to give them the opportunity. I mean, I kinda echo what Eric says. I mean, use your discretion at this point, but as far as a council decision not on the agenda, I'd prefer to have an agenda item and have that discussion, to make sure we're all aligned on some of those, but,
And like I said,
you know,
usually
use your discretion.
and what I do is, it's called a red tag, it's just a little tag we put on their antenna that says, you're in violation of 24-hour parking rule, so that everybody sees it when they drive by. And, we usually give them a couple of days, and then we go to a citation, but like I said, usually after a phone call or two or a couple of days, it's moved, so.
If the ordinance is there and they're in violation, I mean, it's at your discretion.
Okay.
All right, perfect, thank you. All right, well, looks like we moved F1 up front, so we'll go with F1, purchase of fire equipment.
About 2 months ago or whatever, we had done a fire burn, light burn and stuff, and we had bought some of these picks that mount on our air packs, so people have them, bought 7 of them. In that burn, all of a sudden, smoke built up real bad. Guy had it on, and he says, "Why, that was the best thing ever," that he could find out. So, I've been kind of a safety nut lately, and I would like to have purchased 14 of them, so everybody that goes in has a pick in case something happens. 'Cause you never know. They can go in mutual aid with somebody else, they don't have them, but he does. And it's just a safety thing, and right now, they are offering them for like, it's like $350, $380 less. So I'd like to purchase 14 of them. In the meantime, I had contacted the Minnewaca and Sioux Committee to see if they would give us some money to purchase them, and they gave us enough to purchase 2 of them. We do have funding in, grant and fund, account that we'd be able to purchase 12 more, and I would like to purchase those 12.
Any questions for Fire Chief?
This isn't what you called me on, though, is this what you called me about too?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
No questions, I'll look for a motion to approve or not approve the purchase of 14, imaging cameras.
That's 19 in the bond. Okay, good, so, all right, I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, we have a Any further discussion? One, I'd just like to thank the Minnewacan Sioux for their donation of $2,000, certainly appreciated. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks,
you.
Rod. Thank you. All right, that then will take us, Maggie, to 6A1.
Okay, so, in front of you today is the final report for the classification and compensation study. We approved this, early in the year. We have Liza with, David Drones. They did the report for us, and she's here to kind of go through the presentation today.
Okay. So thank you so much, Council and Mayor, for having me here to present the final report. We say final now, but I know there is one more piece that we're going to be working on here in the short term, and that's an evaluation of a city clerk position. So this is as it stands, and then I'll come back to you with a supplement following this report. So I understand that you received a copy of this report as part of your council packet probably about a week ago or so, and had a chance to review it. My plan here is just to kind of walk you through some of the themes that kind of stand out. So your report is in front of you, and the first couple pages are for those of you that like to skip ahead to the last page of your beach read or your novel. That's the outcome of what the study is, but where we're going to start is on page 4. So just to give a little bit of a background, obviously the City of Mayor hired DDA in January of this year to conduct a classification compensation study for 4 positions, and then I had the pleasure of coming back in April and meeting with Administrator McCollum to discuss the project scope and the approach that we wanted to take on this study. And at that time we determined that we are not only conduct a study on the 4 positions, but also include a public works director position. We'd also update job descriptions. We'd conduct a market analysis of all those positions. We'd send out a customized benefit survey to your benchmark communities, and then we'd conduct a wage analysis on those benchmark positions. And during that on-site meeting with Administrator McCollum, we determined there was identified a few concerns. One was that there's not a lot of tenure within your city organization, so therefore there's ongoing concern into your future about recruitment and retention of valuable employees. We also found that the city does not have an established pay structure or pay philosophy, so the city would be open to examining some model language regarding pay philosophy, which you'll find in Appendix C of your report. We also identified that the City Council feels it's important to pay their employees fairly and competitively, and that the City Council would be open to taking a look at a 5, 7, and a 10-step pay system. So with staff's help, we did update those job descriptions. Those job descriptions were reviewed by your Personnel Committee and then obviously adopted by you in June of 2018. We included copies of those updated job descriptions in Appendix A, and that does take up a good bulk of this report. So if you've already seen those job descriptions, you can set those aside and move on. And we conducted a wage analysis of the 5 positions that are found on page 5 of your report. We conducted a comprehensive market analysis with your selected comparable or your benchmark communities, which again were approved in June of 2018. And those communities were selected for several factors. Either those communities that you selected either had a similar tax capacity, annual budget, payroll, benefit information, number of staff, utilities, recreational assets, and even sometimes location too. And of those 19 benchmark communities, 7 of the communities provided extensive survey results. So on page 6, at the top of the page, you'll see the 19 communities that were selected. And the communities in bold, which would be the cities of Aiken, Bird Island, Lakefield, Lester Prairie, Mountain Lake, Norwood, Young American, Watertown, they supplied some detailed survey information, and the bulk of that information would be found in Appendix B. But to provide a summary regarding the positions, those 5 positions that we took a look at, you'll see at the bottom of page 6, at the chart there, you'll see a summary of the survey results regarding like minimum education for each of those positions, experience requirement, whether that position is a non-exempt or exempt status, average number of employees in each of those positions by organization, and as well as the average tenure. And then the salary information came from, again, those survey results to those benchmark communities, but we also pulled it from the League of Minnesota Cities and the Minnesota County Salary Survey information, which is updated on an annual basis. Any questions about that summary information? Well, all right, so a summary of benefit survey, as I mentioned, can be found on Appendix B, and that'll really get into the details of what kind of benefits these communities offer, days off, that type of information. But in our evaluation of the benefits, we determined that Mayor is actually relatively competitive in its overall benefits. Mayor excels in providing on-call pay as well as contributions towards employee dental insurance. Areas in which to consider increasing benefits would be in uniform allowance, bereavement, comp time for non-exempt employees, contributions towards health insurance premiums and life insurance coverage, and then offering short-term and long-term disability insurance. And so the benefits, in addition to offering competitive wages, should be considered when establishing your salary ranges. And then given that there is potentially a noted change in your Public Works Department in 2019, we did include questions as part of that survey that went out to your benchmark communities regarding the makeup of their Public Works Department. So that information is just in here for your information as you evaluate what you want your Public Works Department to look like in the future. So you'll find the graph on the bottom of page 8 illustrates Mayor's current rate by position in comparison to your market minimum and maximum, just as it was reported on that chart that was on page 6. So I like pictures because, to me, I mean, it paints a pretty good picture of where your community is at, and as you can see, where your current wages, they fit very nicely within your market minimum and your market maximum. So that just means that the city is not under or overpaying its employees in relation to its selected market of comparable communities. Following the adoption of the job descriptions, then the positions were then evaluated based on several criteria using our job evaluation tool, or we like to call it our JET tool. We used the JET tool to determine the relationships of the positions within the organization. So mid-page, just above there, you'll see the criteria that we used in evaluating your positions. We took a look at education experience, level of decision-making, technical, interpersonal, and managerial problem-solving, nature of relationships, how these jobs report to each other, physical and mental effort, as well as conditions and hazards. So as I explained to the Personnel Committee, we took a look at for instance, your city administrator position. For education requirement, it would have scored higher than your Public Works Worker 2 position, but then your Public Works Worker 2 position would have scored higher points in physical effort and conditions and hazards. So that's how we take a look at each of these jobs. So you'll see the chart at the bottom of page 9, how each of those job titles were awarded points and its relation to current pay right now, or current salary. In using a customized approach like the JET tool, where it allows the city to justify how its tools or how its jobs are rated and awarded points. And by utilizing the JET tool, it accurately aligns your employees with the job description, as well as takes into consideration internal equity. So after we analyzed a lot of data and information, we were able to develop 2 options for modification to your existing compensation plans. There's, first of all, an open range. So an open range is just how it sounds. It has a minimum and a maximum with no steps in between. It really does allow the council the flexibility of determining how it wants to grant raises to its employees. And employees progress through the range, whether it's through merit increases or performance or equity adjustments. The proposed range can be found in the chart on that mid-page there. You can see it in the right column. And then you can also see how your current wages actually fit into the proposed range. And then the graph at the bottom pulls together all the information. So it pulls together what your benchmark communities, what their minimum and maximum pays are, what the proposed range is, and then where your current salaries fall. As you can see, it all falls very close together. Any questions regarding this information? All right, so then the next option is a step system. So it mirrors your open range. You have your minimum and your maximum, and then you have obviously steps in between, and employees progress through their job salary range over time based on years of satisfactory service. So overtime employees eventually would be paid at the top range of their job, as one would expect. And based on the survey results from your comparable communities, we found those communities on average have a 9-step pay system. Our team, as we took a look at the information that we received and the concerns from the city, we determined that an 8-step salary system actually made the most sense in terms of recruitment and retention and being competitive. In recommending an 8-step system, you still have the proposed minimum and maximum, just like your open range. It's the same. And each year, your employees would earn an approximate salary increase of 3.9%. That is, if they were to receive a satisfactory rating in their performance evaluation. And one would assume by adopting an 8-step system, an employee would earn a competitive salary equivalent to the top of the pay range of mayor's comparable communities if they were to be here 8 years. So the proposed step system is what you're looking at on the screen. And I'll talk about implementation here in just a couple of minutes, but the highlighted areas are where the positions, where they currently stand with their current wages, where they would fall on this chart. In the chart at the top of the page, the next page, it shows how each position would be placed with their associated grade and range on that 8-step system. And as you can see, the current salary range fits again within the proposed range. There's obviously several advantages for adopting a step system. First of all, it allows you as a city and Administrator McCollum to budget annual increases for those payroll dollars. So ideally, she could budget that out for 8 years. But it also gives your employees a visual so that they understand what their growth potential is. And some employees really hang their hat on their para, their pension. And para is based on your top 5, so this really gives them something to look forward to. But it also assures you as the city that your pay system is competitive with your comparative market. So essentially, to wrap it all up, this study was really a tri-pronged approach. We wanted to make sure that we provided you with a fair and equitable compensation system. So we used the information from the benefits and wage analysis, and therefore we were able to use external market data. Then we did the job evaluation and classification, and then we were able to then pull that together and determine an internal measure. And then this allows you to show how your pay system compares to your comparable market. Whatever option the City Council determines to move forward with, whether it's an open range or the 8-step system, both would meet the state's internal pay equity examination. So you have that. Before I move into implementation, does anybody have any questions? All right, so I know sometimes this all sounds nice and dandy, but it's really nice to see what the numbers look like. So we did provide implementation on pages 13 and 14. So if the city were just to take the 4 positions that you have in place right now with the 2018 salary, you can assume that you would be able to budget your payroll budget at $209,888 for 4 positions. If the city were to keep its old system and grant a 1.5% cost of living increase, you would assume that the payroll budget would increase 1.5%, and then that would be at the tune of $3,148. And then by implementing the 8-step salary system, you would be moving your employees into a step that was closest to what they're making right now. That would also take into account moving your Public Works Worker 1 into a Public Works Director position in March. And with that, you would not only be guaranteeing a 1.5% cost of living increase, but you'd also be granting that step increase, and that would reflect a 4.49% increase, or $219,314. And then in 2020, if all of your employees were to receive satisfactory ratings on their performance evaluations, then your employees would progress to the next step, and that would indicate that the city would have a 4.4% increase from 2019, which would be a $9,700 increase, or bringing your dollars to $229,018. And with all of this, the City Council still has the option of granting cost of living increases, but we did not include that on this 2020 budget impact. And we provided a summary right there, so you can take a look at those numbers. So that is all I have. I know it's a lot of me talking, so I'd like to hear what you have to ask, or...
Any comments, questions, clarification? And this, like she said, this was presented to the Personnel Committee, last week, from me and Eric. Tice, any questions? So one, I think it's a very thorough report. I think it's great. I think it's gonna be a great tool for us to move forward. And you touched on either the open-ended or the STEP program. I think that's something we really need to get a handle on here for the city. We've struggled with that
You bet.
on our increases for years, so, that alone is gonna be a great tool, so, I do appreciate it. It's a great, thorough report.
You bet. The only other thing I would just recommend is that I provided 4 examples of pay philosophies in the back. I selected those because I thought maybe they most closely matched, you, the city. And in there, it's by and you can copy and paste or meld these together into a philosophy that makes sense to you as a council. But this is something that you would adopt and place in your personnel manual, and it really lays the groundwork for future councils, so it doesn't have to continue to be a reactive process. It can be a proactive process.
Be very useful, so, yes, thank you.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you, everybody.
Thank you. So Maggie, do we need a motion to accept, this report?
Yeah, I would say so. You're accepting kind of what was presented, and we can kind of then use this document moving forward.
All right, I'll look for a motion to accept the classification comprehensive study, report from David Brown and Associates.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion?
I think the next step would then be, I don't know if we wanna talk about it tonight or at a future meeting, which approach we would wanna take, like looking at the pay philosophy that you mentioned, but then also, do we wanna do open or do we wanna do step?
No,
And
I absolutely think that's our next step, and I think if we take time, digest more of this now after the presentation, I think in a future, council, we should get that set, especially going into budgeting. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. That'll take us to 6A2. Maggie?
Okay, so this is just a quick, hopefully quick, so I am just presenting an option. It's a kind of a education opportunity for myself. It's offered through Hamlin University. It's an economic development certificate. I did provide some information on the program in the packet. It's really geared towards more like a professional group of people, so they kinda have odd hours, and that is, it would be Thursday each month from 2 to 8, and then the following Friday from 8 a.m. to 3:30, and it's once a month. And I guess what I'm asking for is, originally I was saying I would pay for it, which I'm still interested in doing, but I was wondering if the city would consider it time worked, as it's kind of like will benefit the city in a sense, that I would be learning more about economic development for the community. I understand if that's not the case, I would try and make it work still. It would be for 7 months, once a month, and it would be for those partial Thursdays and then full Fridays.
So personnel hasn't discussed this or?
Yeah, it did come to us, 2-3 months ago now, Maggie, was it?
It has been a
It did come to a personnel committee, and if I remember right, and Eric jump in, I know we had discussion of it. I think our thoughts were more a line of, if this is something for continuing education, that the city should be paying for the $29.50. Yep, as
Right,
part of
and
her training, as we would for other seminars and other things as part,
Right.
and then, as far as the vacation time, how we work that out, if it's city or her own, but we thought it was flip-flopped is kind of what our thoughts were in the personnel committee.
So what's in your budget for education?
So right now, was gonna propose like that, I was originally gonna attend and, like I think this year was an ICMA conference, an international, conference, but, I mean, not a national conference, but I was wondering if instead of going to that, I could use the money for that to pay for, 'cause I think it's broken down into thirds, like I think a third of it's due this year and then 2/3 like split up between early next year and then that, and so I was
So what's in your budget for education?
I think this year, it's 4,000 and I have used some of it for a local conference. I can look at the numbers, but, it would be, I think if I did cut this into a third this year, it would be about the same cost as it would if I went to that conference, which I would rather use that money to pay for this if possible than to go to that conference.
So it's up to you how you wanna use your education money, I think, in my opinion. I trust that you make the best decision there. So, yeah, obviously we should probably take it out of that budget. I don't know how to handle the rest.
Well, I think that's, that's an area that we struggle with is economic development. I believe it is a training that's in the best interest of the city. Like I said, at the personnel committee, is I pay to go to it.
And I can even do half, like, or I don't know, I don't know.
I think it's important training, and I think it's important that you go, and I would support the city in paying for you to go there. We need to keep our leaders educated, and I think it's part of your professional growth with the city, and it's gonna help us out in the long run.
So you're saying the time from 2 to 8 would be considered time worked?
It'll be regular work time.
No, I
2 to
wouldn't
4:30.
consider, I would only do 2 to 4:30. So I wouldn't like book extra time for being there till 8. Like, 'cause Thursday would be 2 to 8, I would just say, okay, just the 2 to 4:30 would be time worked.
Sure.
And then Friday, 8 to 3:30.
And then are you putting mileage on there and stuff, or?
I wouldn't, no, I wouldn't have to do that. Yes?
Well,
I
I would,
don't know.
my opinion is if the city's gonna pay for it and the city's gonna comp your time, the city should be paying for your mileage as well.
I'll look at the policy. There might be a policy about that, as far as education and mileage.
I know it says like for conferences, like you, like.
If it's a work-related function and you're going to it, and we're not providing a vehicle, you're entitled to mileage.
Yep.
If it doesn't, it should.
All right. Would someone like to make a motion? Eric, would you?
I'll make that motion to
To,
approve the city administrator to attend the Center for Public Administration and Leadership as well, so we will pay for that, training, as well as compensate for her time and any other expenses related to such training.
all right. We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to have the city administrator attend the classes at a cost of $2,950, along with time spent on Thursdays and Fridays on those specific dates, with mileage and any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And that will take us, Maggie, to 6B1, please.
Okay, so I don't know if Mark, do you wanna, so we do have an application, I'll let Mark kinda go into the details.
All right.
Okay, yep, so we're gonna be discussing an application for the replacement of agricultural wetland impacts using the Minnesota Wetland Bank. Mark, works for the city as our, he does our wetland reviews and implementation, so he's here tonight to kinda go through that application with us.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Yes, my name is Mark Kellogg, and I am the principal owner of Kellogg Environmental Services Company. We have been the wetland agent for the city of Mayer for over 15 years now. The city of Mayer is the local governmental unit responsible for administering the Wetland Conservation Act within the limits of the city, and by some prior agreement also in outlying parts.
I don't know if John can help me with it. Right now, we like at some point we acquired some of the legal responsibilities for zoning for the
So the northeast part of town there, north of the Fieldstone development, city has zoning authority over a large tract of land. I think it's all zoned agricultural right now, as part of the Wetland annexation agreement, and it's Watertown Township, I believe. So we have that, so we have zoning control on that, so this property is all for that.
Okay.
So the property is not in the city limits, but it is within the area that the city's responsible for administering. The parcel that we're talking about is at in the southeast quadrant of the intersection of Highway 25 and Highway 7.
So it's the corner.
Right in the
Okay.
corner there, and the property is owned by Greg Hazy. Greg, in July, submitted an application to fill a small wetland that was determined to be a man-made pond, probably was a stock pond or something at one time. We scheduled a meeting with the other wetland authorities. They came out and looked at it, and we decided that the area was probably wetland before at one time, and so it was regulated under the Wetland Conservation Act. But under the agricultural program in the Minnesota, he would be able to fill the wetland without having to make an effort to avoid and minimize impacts, and then he would have to replace the wetland at a ratio of 1:1. And so we reviewed the application for consistency with the program requirements, and those included that it was a certain type of wetland. We call it a type 1 wetland, which is a drier type of wetland. The wetland had to be on agricultural land, and in this case it was abutting agricultural land. Then Mr. Hazy provided us evidence that he was enrolled in the federal farm program, and then provided evidence that he had an agreement to purchase wetland credits to replace the wetlands that were impacted. And we ran that by the Board of Water and Soil Resources, who kind of oversees the wetland program, and they concurred that his project would qualify and recommended approval of it. So I believe, I don't know, Maggie, did you include in the documentation here was submitted was a purchase agreement for wetland bank credits, and like I said, the documentation that he was in the farm program. And so there's a resolution, I believe, in front of the council to approve the application to fill .3 acres of wetland to facilitate the Hazy Wetland Fill Project. I don't know if you're interested in an explanation of any of these rules, but basically it's saying that the city is the local governmental unit, and the city is doing their responsibility, and that the application complies with the rules of the Wetland Conservation Act, and then that the city council approves Greg's application for replacement through the ag wetland impacts in the Minnesota Wetland Bank.
So talk a little on that replacement. So this .3 acres, the intent is to fill it in.
Yes.
And then what's the replacement side of it then? He has to create.
So the replacement, or it's commonly referred to as mitigation. So I believe in this case there was a entity in, I think, was it Polk County, that had created wetlands to develop what's called a wetland bank. They just made wetlands apart from any fill project, and then someone like Greg, who fills wetlands and has to provide replacement, Greg could have made his own wetlands as replacement, or an easier option and a preferred option, it would be that he would actually buy the credits and then it's done, we know that the credits are successful, and, after all the paperwork is signed and Greg writes his checks, then,
Okay, yep, okay.
then he gets to fill his
That's
wetland.
similar to what our wetlands is and
Yes, that's,
created, yeah.
that's
so same
exactly
thing.
what the
Okay,
city
I
has
just want
there.
clarification.
That
Yep.
part right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I saw him draining that up.
And it's our authority and everything's in order, and, Dave, do you have any concerns from an engineering standpoint on?
No, I mean, I think this is pretty standard stuff. Mark walked you through the process.
Okay.
One of the issues we run into and with the developments or whatever, just going to the bank versus replacing it on site. Typically when it's something small like this, it's a lot of work, and the likelihood of success sometimes gets to be tough to try to create wetland somewhere else on the site, so.
Right, okay.
It makes sense to purchase it from the bank from my standpoint.
All right, perfect, thank you. All right, any other, questions? If not, I'll look for a motion to approve resolution 8-27-18-24, approving the application to fill 0.3 acres of wetland to facilitate the Hazy Wetland Fill Project. We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep,
Thank you, Mark.
that was it. All right, Maggie, 6B2, please.
Okay, so we're just looking for a little direction, for Second Street construction traffic. This has been an ongoing issue for several months. We have received several complaints from a resident about construction traffic on that road. We do have a developer, who is building some townhomes in that area, in that vicinity, and we have been kind of going back and forth, trying to find a resolution, as how to keep the construction traffic on those main corridors, like the state and the county roads. But then even then, some residential roads like Canary is used to still get some of that construction traffic up to the site. So, this resident has contacted the sheriff's department, they contact us, they contact the developer, and so one thing we tried was to do a 5-ton traffic sign up on Second Street to kind of keep those higher weighted trucks off of the street. The difficulty there is that we aren't able to determine which ones are above weight and which ones aren't. And so that's kind of was the next request, was that those vehicles get weighed, and we just don't have the manpower to do that. So the next step was, well, maybe we need to take on that sign and put up no construction signs on Second Street to keep it off. So I guess is John here? John, okay. John's here, and he can kind of present what he's been going through too. I guess we're trying to find a resolution. We have been working with the developer to kind of try and direct that traffic. It doesn't always happen though.
So the exact complaint is noise or?
It's traffic on the street.
Just
Like
traffic?
people
Just
traffic?
traffic.
regular
Construction,
Construction vehicle traffic?
Yes.
Okay.
Cement trucks
Okay.
hauling in heavy stuff. So there was some talk that we had, I think, months ago at a Public Works meeting discussing some of this and
Are
discussing
these
the
semi-trailers, or is this your construction company, or?
Cement trucks and dump
cement trucks.
Okay.
So that's discussion
Occasional semi.
in
Are
our,
they ruining signals?
well, that was some of our meeting that we discussed, that we would prefer to keep these heavier trucks off of our street because of those streets. And Dave, you can,
Nobody wants to move in.
Dave, you can,
Go and change the weight rating of the road, because we want to change the weight rating of the road to keep somebody up the road. If it's a
ten-ton
road, it's a 10-ton road.
and we want, growth.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility to provide the streets for those people to get to where they need to go.
Right, and I think the concern is that we just don't know how to proceed, and we know that more housing will go in. So,
Is it a person in that particular development, the what is it, Sunset Meadows?
not
Is it
yet.
just that development?
I think it's on Second Street, so.
Okay. My next question is, are the
Yeah.
construction vehicles abiding by the noise ordinance?
Yes, because they're within their time frame.
Okay,
It's
so,
an annoyance, I'm
So
sure.
Dave,
and
maybe
the
you can-
problem is
I don't
Maybe
disagree,
you
I
can
hear,
give some
I hear
history.
it all day
Yeah,
long.
if I could just chime in here, just kind of this, from a more general perspective. It is absolutely fair, from my perspective, it's absolutely fair and appropriate for the city to be able to designate haul routes for construction type activities. If we're doing a construction project development, one of our own projects, we'll specify that this is the way we want you coming in and out. Usually it's either the most direct route, or if there are highways and county facilities that can direct that traffic.
Somebody that's contracted with the city, and then they would be compliant.
Or through a development
voluntarily.
agreement or something like
You're
that.
not telling a tax-paying company that you can't drive on.
Right, so, correct, so now, backing up from that, again, in this case, this location, there are county roads and a state highway that you can get to that site without going down another neighborhood street, but just from a practical standpoint. So the issue gets to be is, all right, well, how do you kind of a friendly way to try to direct that traffic where you want to go, if it's just causing nuisance issues, if we're concerned about the wear and tear on our streets, whatever it might be. So the one thought is, well, if we posted the road for 5 ton, that might be, if you have a heavy load, that might trigger you to stay on the county facilities instead of cutting across on the neighborhood street. That we ran into some logistical issues just from the ability to be able to enforce that, right? Yep. So one of the thoughts then, and I think you'll hear from others and your sheriff representative, but one of the thoughts we had is it might be appropriate to have something in your city ordinance that gives you the ability to post a route for no construction traffic. And those heavy loads, something to that effect. The city would have some signs that you'd be able to post, and wherever that work is going in around town, to maybe be able to control those roads better when we don't have a development agreement or a contract directly with the people doing the work. So, again, from my perspective, it's not inappropriate to try to direct heavy loads, construction type traffic on a specific route for whatever, again, if it's the most direct route or whatever it might be, to try to get those people there in the most efficient way on roads that are meant for that kind of traffic.
And in your opinion, knowing how these streets are built and some of those older ones there that we know we have to do some work on, it's already been damage to them.
Yep.
Would you think it's best to keep these bigger trucks off those roads just for the longevity of these roads?
Yeah, again, if it's practical and we have the ability to do it, yeah, I think certainly that would be beneficial to our roads. Now, again, understand some of the practical issues of, when it's a individual home site and you got suppliers coming from different areas that you don't necessarily have direct contact with, or the ability to tell them, how to get there. If they're not your trucks, how do you direct that? I mean, there are some practical issues with it, but I don't think it's an unfair request from my perspective.
Tim, is there a legal standpoint on this?
I mean, you guys have control over your local roads. If you wanted, what you bring up about some sort of a ordinance addressing the signage, I mean, that's something that we could be looking at, some of the building code. But I mean, it makes sense that the city's roads, the city, it is something that can be regulated, but regulations should also try to be realistic.
If you wanna come, can you come to the podium, please, and
Then you use your microphone too.
state your...
Put your microphone up so people can hear you too. I live up in the corner of Second Street and Canary, and I've had Mr. Stulke out numerous times when they've been running cement trucks up Second Street. He was out the one day, talked to the guy. He assured me that they weren't gonna be coming back. Half hour later, what happened?
My defense, I did talk to that, but they came from...
You did talk to him.
They came from a different cement outfit. So I talked to one company in Sunstone and a different,
Okay.
came from a different, Sunstone company.
Didn't I
can't...
I know. I said that's water over the dam, but we're trying to resolve this. Been working on this for 2 years, almost now. And Second Street up at the intersection of Canary, there's a manhole in that intersection. If you drive up there now, on the west side of the manhole, it's down about 4 to 6 inches now. What they've been doing, the cement trucks have been coming up Canary now, since he's posted Second Street 5-ton. When they turn off a 30 on Canary, they lift all the tag axles that are down on 2 axles coming up around the corner, and they're going around the manhole. They're killing Second Street again. The city did fix it a few years ago. It's gonna need some work again now.
So now we're saying they are damaging the streets.
Pardon?
So now we're saying they are damaging the streets. The trucks are damaging the streets.
Well, the cement trucks are, when they're over 5-ton when they're loaded, when they lift all the axles.
So are they using the tag axles correctly then?
If they came in on 30 into the development, they wouldn't have to come through the neighborhood at all.
What, that street, what is that, what's that rated for?
Oh, Second Street, I guess I don't know.
The one past the church, Second Street.
Yeah, no, I understand that, just off the top of my head, I'd say it's a 7-ton road, which is just typical of a city street. I don't think there's anything from the standpoint of, kind of a year-round.
That one's a 5-ton because it doesn't have curb and gutter. All of our other streets are...
But that's not a year-round,
Not a year-round.
not a year-round restriction,
Yeah,
so.
during road restrictions.
Right, no,
Yeah.
so that's the issue is, in the spring, you have
Right,
a
that's
load
what we're
restriction
going
on it, but, the rest of the year, it's, they're
Yeah,
just
you
like
did-
any of your other streets.
Yeah. Did you look at the scale taker though, to see what the truck was, what weight at the scale, by any chance?
I think,
There's probably one left. I mean, you could ask if they'll always have a scale taker with them, it'll tell you what the truck is, how much oil it's got. You know, I don't know, I just see a problem, I mean, can we just arbitrarily just say that this 5-ton, or 7-ton road is a 5-ton road at any time?
No, well, yes, I absolutely, we could rate it anything that, we feel is appropriate to protect it. Again,
Who makes that decision?
Well, it ultimately be the city council
So is
that
it
would.
posted right now is it posted as a 5-ton road? Was that approved by the city council?
But then you also create another problem. You don't have scales to weigh any truck steel.
They do,
So how are you gonna prove the truck is over?
you have to weigh it.
Okay.
Well, again.
And you know what that entitles?
Yeah, I'd weigh truck.
Okay. Then you gotta have scales for Mr. Stokey to use scales.
So,
Or take the truck out of commission till you get them weighed.
I'd encourage you to look at this from a bigger picture perspective than just what's going on with Second Street right now. If there's issues with construction traffic potentially all around town, right, everywhere.
Yeah.
Through the development process, we have a development agreement, we have more control over those construction activities. Once it goes to the individual lots and the individual homeowners is where it starts to be more, we don't have necessarily direct control over that. Your building official is overseeing those projects, but as far as the hauling, things like that. So an example that I can see for future issue is take, cold water, the future phases of cold water. once they start building houses in there, there's gonna be multiple ways to get to a specific location, potentially, right? And so when the 8th edition comes in, all kinds of different ways to get to that lot that's building a house. Some of them are gonna be more direct and maybe more beneficial or easier to patrol if you have the ability to try to help direct that traffic for those specific phases of construction. So, again, the way I was viewing it is, given that our first attempt at trying to change the behaviors or dictate this was unsuccessful with the way we went about it, again, maybe something in city code that gave you the ability to make some postings for restricting construction traffic to help control these kind of situations, would be a better way to go. Again, it would give you some ability to address the specific issue. And again, so to fair, not picking on the builders here, but the issue gets to be when you came from Maple Grove with your concrete and you've never been to Mayor before and you have your GPS on, it tells you to turn on Second Street, that's the way you're gonna go. If you get there and there's a no construction traffic, it kinda can force it, guide you where you wanna go.
Then you
In code and we're.
gave the police officer authority to do something.
Assuming that makes sense, the person that has to enforce
So,
it.
John, can you come up, please? So is that the biggest concern, John? Are we just having a problem controlling the trucks? Or are you opposed to the, I mean,
I've told our trucks, and I can tell, I don't have in touch with every driver. I don't have in touch with every appliance delivery truck or Sears or,
no.
I got delivery trucks coming from plumbing supplies, coming from all over. And if it tells us to come there. The construction traffic sign, am I gonna be ticketed then? Every Metzel Homes truck that drives down Second Street, are we gonna be getting tickets? Was kind of the question then, if that, I mean, and we do, 'cause it can make more sense for me to come, makes more sense for me to come to 30 and come up that way, 'cause I don't have 2 stop signs to hit when I come up that way. But when we do work on that end one, sometimes it's just easier to come in on the other direction. Or if I got trucks coming in and out, then they can some come in and then they come out that way.
But I know
It's
not all
just-
your trucks are over 5 tons.
And we're not hauling.
And neither is Sears or Warner Stallion or
We're
anybody
not
else, so what's
hauling
the,
800 yards of fill out of this development, like on a development type project where they're building the roads either. We're just building residential houses, which are the same.
so
Second Street goes both ways, so there's not a sign going the other way that we can't drive that way, only in front of his house we can't drive.
So my question is it the heavy duty, big, I mean, yeah, what's the complaint? Is it all the traffic, or is it just the big trucks?
It's the truck traffic.
The
Like
big
John-
over
John-
5
John
ton?
has more control over the small vehicles, 'cause he can talk to these guys when they come. Come in the other way if you're gonna come with a load. It's when you get the cement truck come in. Sean's gotten a lot better. Sean doesn't come by there very often no more.
So your concern is about the big heavy duty trucks?
It's the heavy duty trucks that are killing the road.
Okay, so that's the main concern.
The main issue, and people not stopping at the stop sign.
Well, that's kinda,
That's a separate issue.
yeah.
But
That's the biggest issue is, 'cause they're gonna kill the road. The road I can see how much it's killed it already in the last 2 to 3 years.
Looks different than the other direction, the other roads. I mean,
And
all the roads, Highway 25 is terrible.
I know.
And I'm in favor of
I mean,
trying to
let's-
keep our roads.
When you drive over the next time, stop by the manhole, look at the, next to the manhole.
I don't ever stop, I go through that stop sign.
I know, most of the time you
It's
do.
not- no.
You're good at stop.
All right, great, that's
So I-
You guys have gotten a lot better too.
I do think we need to maintain these roads. I mean, I think we need to do what we can, especially on Second Street. We don't have curb and gutter, there's not a lot to them. I would prefer people going around, but it's how to manage through that.
But we can't
And-
dictate where
Yeah.
people,
Yeah,
I mean, if Sears is coming to deliver something,
right.
you know, just like if they're coming to my house, I can't dictate if they're gonna, Well, no, but, I mean, the concern is
And I
all
wouldn't call
the
that
traffic,
construction
so.
traffic either, I mean, myself, but.
No, I wouldn't either.
So I think there is some,
It's not an amplifier, the microphone is just hooked up to the system, yeah, it's just recording.
yeah.
So this is just recording, you
The-
can't hear.
Okay.
I'm all for looking at an ordinance that's gonna control traffic when we need to.
Yep.
But like I said, I think if it's a 10-ton road, it should be a 10-ton road. If the road is failing, then we need to address the fact the road's failing. If we need to make it a 2-ton road, then I guess it needs to be a 2-ton road year long. But I just don't agree with just arbitrarily putting a sign up that says it's a 5-ton road when it's a 7-ton road, and it's just there to kind of address an issue.
And I do think we have to, I do think we have to get a policy in place also, especially going forward, because we have Hidden Creek, we have Coldwater Crossing, they're coming in, and we wanna get traffic routes set. I think there's some important.
I think the 5-ton sign was put up to try to deter the construction traffic off of that Second Street. Am I right?
Yeah, yep, that's right.
That's why
That's right.
they put it, that's why they listed it as 5-ton. They wanted the construction traffic, heavy out on the county road. I think the purpose.
How many more lots are in that area, John? It's just about full now, isn't it?
Probably got, I think there's 13 more.
Oh, 13 more lots still in that?
Twin units.
Okay. Okay.
And Officer Stocky, you had something to say, you had raised your hand earlier.
Well, I was just gonna say, it's on Second Street, but then, when you said if you go down Canary, there's nothing, you're still going over that manhole, there's nothing that prevents the vehicles from coming down Canary,
Yeah.
there's no sign there or going the other way. And then, I know part of it was, yeah, let's put up this 5-ton sign, so keep the construction traffic, but now, if you're building in Coldwater, somebody says, hey, you know, we got kids playing in there, we don't want trucks rolling down our street too, how do we get a 5-ton sign up?
Right.
One put up there for.
Or I think 30's too fast, maybe we should put up a 10-mile-an-hour sign.
Yep.
I mean, if we're gonna put signs up, they need to be enforceable for one thing, and they need to be legally put up.
Well, I would suggest, I think the main concern is the road and how our road's wearing on this. And I'd suggest maybe Public Works and City Engineering go out and take a look at the road, see what the impact is to this, and do we need to do something? If the road's getting damaged, I think we need to do something.
But construction needs to happen in there, so if that road's not damaged, then the next one will, right?
Well,
Or are they
the
built
road,
better?
Highway 25's built better, Conroe 30's built better, and
But
the
once they
entrance,
get into
the
town,
entrance into that development is built better, because they have curb, gutter, so it's just a better road. So I think from those reasons, I think we have to look at those roads.
John, what's the reason for not taking the entrance into Sunset Meadows off of 30?
I don't have any reason not to.
Okay.
I think it's like Dave said,
Other
GPS
than
is,
the couple that may come from Maple Grove and then use the GPS that came in that way. So it's not like we asked.
But you
them to
order
come.
the cement, so you could say, when you
I
order the
don't.
cement,
I
you
mean,
can
that's
say, come.
third hand. I mean, I have a cement
subs.
contractor that does the work and then they.
I think it's easier for a truck to get in that way, you don't have all the stop signs.
they don't,
I don't
but
disagree with
I
you,
think
but-
we gotta watch our road. If our roads are being damaged, we have to do something. And I would suggest we have engineering and Public Works take a look at the roads. Mr. Hahn, if you have something to say, if you wanna come on up and,
No. We never asked to do that at our meeting.
state your name for the record, please.
Wes Hunt, 208 Ash Avenue North, Mare, Minnesota. I was just gonna have a simple question answered, and I didn't expect to have to be an athlete to do it, but anyway. When a road such as Second Street were to be reconstructed, who would bear the cost of that?
That would have to be determined, if what was getting done.
How is it usually determined? Who usually bears the cost?
Likely an assessment.
That's right. So I'm sure Mr. Zierman has taken that into consideration too.
Yep, and that's where I agree. I think we need to go out and look at it, make sure the road's not being damaged.
So
And if it is, I
maybe
think,
there should be some sort of negotiation then as to who would bear the cost if there's road damage.
Well, it's a possibility that it doesn't have to be just the people that live on that road, because it is
Well,
really
if you're gonna-
well-traveled road.
If you're gonna put curb and gutter and all that, then that's usually assessed.
Correct.
And it can be shared between the city
Well, it shouldn't be.
as a whole and just the people that.
It wasn't shared when I did mine.
Do you drive down it?
Hmm?
Do you ever drive down it, walk down it, use it?
When I paid for my frontage, it wasn't shared.
Highway 25?
That's right.
All right,
I had to pay for my frontage.
Thank you.
Point taken.
Yep, thank you. Anything else then? Any other thoughts on this? I would prefer the engineer go take a look at the road and make sure the road's not being damaged. And if it is, I think we have to do something about getting some of that traffic off there.
Look at making it a lower ton road, then maybe.
Do we need a motion for that, Maggie, just to have, or can you just work with Public Works and city engineer to go
I don't think we need a
take a look at the road and then we'll bring it back?
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that? All right, thank you. Let's go to 6B3, please.
Okay, so I just wanted to give you an update on the kids' company lease. As you know, we have a lease. We just approved it actually in June to extend their lease for the year. They usually do their summer program here, and then they do their school year during the school months, which is usually 9 months. So at this time, the lease, the monthly rent was $2,780. On this August, mid-August, the staff was informed that Watertown Mayor Community Ed, their numbers were not where they should be for this year, and that they would not be able to continue to host the site in Mare. Therefore, looking at the contract, there's really no language that allows for the termination of the contract. We renew it every year, and we did renew it already for this year, and so I guess as a result, the council needs to discuss how to move forward since we don't have any termination language. So it has, if you look at it's in the packet, if you look at the agreement, it has termination for the summer part of it. It just doesn't have anything for some reason, for the school year portion. And
That's normally something that technically try to get in there, not necessarily, this is a pretty favorable lease for the city.
Pretty what?
Favorable terms for the city as the landlord, and that the tenant doesn't have the ability to back out during the term of the lease. But I mean, that's the rub right now, because the tenant has to be the school district where we wanna go with it, and that's sort of the direction that we're looking for.
yeah, so I guess our options right now are to terminate the lease, and just move forward, otherwise treat it as a breach of contract and hold them to the contract, or look for a middle ground to renegotiate with them.
Either way, we pay for it, right?
I think they were really sad, it was 8 kids had signed up and confirmed for the school year.
How many did they say they needed?
Well, it wasn't necessarily always a money thing, from my understanding of when I was talking, because this impacts my family. And 8 kids was just not enough and they weren't all full-time, the kids would be bored. So it's not enough kids to have any sort of activities. I think 16 to 20 was their ideal numbers, so they could actually have different games played. So the superintendent, I think, had made the decision when only 8 children had signed up, that it just wasn't feasible to stay open and also have a staff person here.
So do we think if we lowered the rent, they would stay with the 8 people?
We tried to talk to them about that, and they just,
I still think
it
it's a benefit to
still
our
has to go
community.
with the fact that they.
Yeah, I think it was more so that only having 8 kids, there's times where my kids were here for an hour and a half, because kids picked up at 4, and my kids don't get here, picked up till 5:30, and it was just them for an hour and a half. It gets kind of boring when.
I'm glad they tried, I mean, it was, cause
I don't think they're gonna give up on it, and they may come back and say, try again for the summer, but they're just for the school year. There wasn't enough demand
So we were at football, and, still the talk is that people from mayor kind of feel like we're just kind of left out of the Watertown School District. And, I'm glad that they tried. It's too bad it's not working, because there's been there's a lot of good press
The
about it.
families
People
that
enjoyed
liked it, I mean, it was very convenient, it saved me 20 minutes in commuting.
I hope the school district will continue to try to, strengthen that relationship with mayor people as well.
I think that's their goal. It's just for the kids' sake.
Or try to redo this again, revisit this and keep it in their advertisements that it's available in there and pending attendance. That's what we're trying to do.
I sure would wanna hope the school district would get on that. No, something that just didn't work. Too bad it didn't.
Would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to terminate the lease.
Allow them to terminate it.
Allow them to terminate it,
Yeah, we have a motion to allow them to terminate. Do we have a second?
I do, I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? I completely agree with that. They've been a good partner. I think it's almost been 3 years, hasn't it? I would like to reach out, if we're gonna terminate, I'd like to reach out that they do, every year look at this actively and see what they, try to get people and come to another agreement to keep this for our residents, so.
Don't wanna burn that bridge.
Right.
Michael Wegner, I just have a question. Does this affect the cleaning contract in any way?
It may.
Okay.
We pulled it, and we'll discuss that a little bit.
Good.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 6B4.
Do you wanna go over that?
Yeah,
now?
I'll go ahead.
Okay.
So, as you know, the city has been approached by Jaguar Communications with, interest in bringing cable services.
Great interest.
To the, yes, there's an event coming up at the end of the month. And so now, this is the first step in the franchising process. As the council knows, there's another cable company in town, New Ulm Telecom, there's been a franchise that's been issued. The process for granting a franchise is set forth by statute. The first step in that process is what we're asking for the council to take tonight, and that is, authorizing publication of a notice of an intent to consider issuing a franchise. What that is published in the newspaper. It gives notice that the city is considering, issuing a franchise. We have one applicant that we are aware of. It's possible that there are others out there, it's doubtful. But just the statute, this is the process that needs to be followed. I put a staff report in that kind of walks through the timeline, and that's all very clear in statute, whereas, the first publication date, if we pass the resolution tonight, we can get it in the paper on Friday. It needs to be published 2 weeks in a row, and you need to accept applications at least 20 days from the first publication. So we need to get it in the paper, keep it open for 20 days. That brings us to the regular meeting at the end of September, which would be the public hearing to consider the applications. Basically, the application specifies the information that a party interested in getting the franchise needs to submit. We would put that before the committee, they'd come and they would pitch their application to us, and then the city is not permitted to grant a franchise until at least 7 days after that public hearing has happened. So then what we would do in my communications with Jaguar, there's a lot of interest, they're interested in getting it in the ground as quick as they can. If we want that to happen before the construction season ends, we probably would be looking at a special meeting the first week of October instead of waiting for a regular meeting, just to come in with a single agenda item on whether or not to issue a award of franchise. The franchise language is, so normally what would happen, when you decide to issue a franchise, then you would, direct the negotiation of the franchise language. We already have a franchise in town, and there's a statute that, basically, it's a competitive statute that doesn't allow you to give a new franchise, competitive advantage over existing franchises. So certain terms have to be similar or the same. Council for Jaguar has given me a draft of what they would
is very similar, we reviewed it, we've, gone back and forth a few times, but I don't foresee any issues with the language of the franchise ordinance as it is based upon one that already is in place, just a few minor changes. We just need to make sure that it, complies with the statutory requirements of competitive advantage. So what we're asking for today is a resolution, that would set the application fee. So the application fee, the intent of the application fee is to sort of recoup the costs of issuing the franchise. Also, there is a mechanism for recouping some of the costs in the franchise ordinance itself that would be issued. So because this isn't, I think a $500 application fee will make sure that, that the time of the hearing and things like that can be covered, as well as we can, the language of the franchise ordinance itself would have some additional, reimbursement type costs. So are there any questions? I know that Jaguar has a couple of representatives here today as well.
Okay, so this $500 kind of put it in the paper, some of our costs right now.
Yep.
Would that include if there was a special meeting, council, I mean,
Yeah,
do you think that's included?
So the language, so that would be used for, to offset those costs, so it definitely cover publication.
Okay.
I know that a lot of the work of drafting the ordinance, I've been reviewing it, but it has been the ordinance itself would be drafted by their council. So, that is, a cost that we would be saving on that. The benefit of already having an ordinance to go off of. We're not reinventing the wheel on that. But the language of the ordinance itself would have some provision for, getting reimbursed for the cost of getting it all set up as well.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. Okay. Now, is anyone from Jaguar, do you want to speak at all? Anything you want to add? Please.
Good evening. My name is Christine Anderson. I'm the corporate attorney at Jaguar, and I appreciate having heard from us. Please don't throw rotten vegetables at me. I'm not a nasty attorney. And John Rod, our sales director, is also here. You've seen him before. He tells me tonight he's here for the eye candy, and I'm here to be the mouthpiece. And I appreciate the fact that Mr. Sullivan has worked so well with me. As he indicated, we've drafted the proposed franchise, so we took the bulk of that work in-house to save the city money. I worked with the existing franchise that Administrator McCollum provided to Mr. Rod, and used that as the basis. There are some minor changes. In many cases, we find that being pretty common with franchises where there's an existing franchise, because just as a matter of practice, there are changes in the way construction happens now. There are locating requirements that didn't used to be there, and so sometimes there are minor changes. A lot of times we find that those changes are things that aren't actually being enforced in existing franchises just because of the metamorphosis of construction. The other thing that makes this different from a traditional old-school cable plant is it used to be when a cable company came in and sought a franchise, they were putting in coax cable that was dedicated cable plant exclusively. What we put in is fiber optic service. It's capable of not only providing video services for television, but also high-speed internet and telephone service. And so that makes this a little different. Mr. Sullivan spoke about the fact that I've communicated with him about our concern of running up toward the end of construction season here. We recognize, because we're in this business, we're in lots of areas in the state, we do a lot of work in Carver County. We recognize we can't construct a pure cable-only facility without a franchise. But as I said, this isn't cable-only. It also allows for internet and telephone. But more importantly than that, we can't sell video services without a franchise. So theoretically, if we wait until all the dominoes fall to make this happen before we even think about putting a shovel in the ground, even with the city council working with us to move this as quickly as possible, as Mr. Sullivan's timeline does, we still are in a situation where, as a practical matter, we live in Minnesota. And, we could have snow next week the day after corn dogs are done being sold at the fair, for all we know. Look how far we had it into April this year. We really want to be able to bring service to the people of Mayer this year. So what we are prepared to do, and I had a conversation with our CEO to confirm it again this morning, we're prepared to go ahead and begin the construction process, calling in locates and things like that, as early as the next week or two, so that we can start the construction soon, knowing that we don't have a franchise. We'll wait to start selling video. That puts a little crimp in the open house, but, I mean, the open house will still happen. It's just that we can't sign anybody up for video services. If we know that we're all sort of operating in good faith, it's better for the city, it's better for us, if we know there aren't going to be any major language surprises. So that's really why we came tonight, is so that if you have any questions or you do have any concerns about anything that might be a little different, that we're here so that we can work with you. And we also would like you to know that's kind of our plan in terms of construction. But if you're coming at us with a bulldozer and you're going to say, no, wait a minute, we're going to fight about language, please tell us that too, so that we don't break ground.
No, and I appreciate that. I think we've heard nothing but positive. We're, I think, as anxious as you guys are to have this. I think most residents were hopeful it was a month ago. So I think from the language, unless Tim, from what I've seen, it seems to be pretty straightforward. I don't think there's going to be any issues. As far as I'm concerned, we get this fast-tracked and get it going.
Yeah, and we recognize, and we're not asking for any hard and fast commitment.
Yeah,
we understand the statutory process. It's just helpful to us to know if there are any surprises in the works. And we really did do everything we could to make it similar but practical.
Right.
Are you talking about breaking ground before the public hearing?
Yes, but not doing anything that would be selling video. See, the difference is, if it was a traditional cable plant, we couldn't put in anything without a franchise. But we have lots of areas where Rochester's a really big city, where there's an incorporated city where we provide services. So we have facilities in the ground, we comply with all the local permitting requirements and things like that. We put the conduit in, we put the fiber optic in, we provide internet service, telephone service. Those don't require franchises. The video service requires the franchise. The way the franchise statute is written, and Mr. Sullivan can probably weigh in on this too if you'd like him to, the way that video or cable franchise was written says construction can't start and sales can't start until there's a franchise issued. But that was created when the cable plants going in only provided cable television. So what they were burying in the ground was cable that only provided that service. And in order to comply with the statutory requirement, cable companies couldn't start putting facilities in the ground that provided only cable without getting a franchise, because the city needed to say, yes, you can go ahead. Because our fiber optic is capable of providing internet and voice services. If we sell video, that's just one more thing that goes over the fiber optic line. It doesn't change the character of the construction. We legally have the ability to do that once all the proper permits and things are granted, regardless of whether there's a cable franchise. So in order for us to get the jump on construction, that would be our plan, to work with moving forward with the construction as quickly as possible so that we can get service to the residents within this construction season, rather than waiting to even start that process until later in the fall. Because it's not just about us putting in our main line, right? We put in our main line, but then for every resident that wants service, we also have to be able to construct a drop from the main line to the house.
And there's nothing in our current franchise agreement with, Newtel or whoever bought them there that would get us into trouble for going ahead and.
Well, the franchise agreements are non-exclusive, so you always have the right to allow competition to come in. The issue being, there's only certain terms of the franchise agreement that have to meet the competitive requirements, and those are not the types of terms that she's talking about here. I mean, what she's saying is, they're more than a cable company. They could construct, if they were to not offer cable TV, they wouldn't need a franchise at all. They're just an internet and phone company, and that's different types of regulations. Sure, there might be federal regulations, but they don't need a franchise to do that. But because of the way technology is right now, it's just a matter of sending a different signal over there once they do have the franchise to do it. Are there other cities that you've taken this approach with?
Yes, there are. In fact, in the Carver County area right now, that the same thing is happening in some of the other small communities. Jaguar has been part of the Carver County fiber optic ring since its inception. We actually helped with the construction, we helped with the management of that. And because Carver County is very dedicated to having all of its communities within the county really having access to high-speed broadband, we try to help with that wherever we can. And we have more cities and townships than we could possibly serve asking us for service every year. We've really focused this part of the year in the Carver County area. We'll be focusing in the Carver County area again next year. And so both in the Carver County area but also in some of our other areas, this is a position that we find ourselves taking with some frequency, just because if we have communities that are located near each other, and we can bring construction crews out to start doing the construction and keeping the ring connected, it's sort of like dominoes and they fall. That helps keep costs down for everyone, and if costs can be contained for our company, in turn that allows us to help keep costs contained competitively for the end users. So this is something we do, and there are some communities where we don't provide video at all, but we know that that's a service that people here are very, very interested in, which is why we're also interested in seeking the franchise.
So I don't have the other contract to compare to, but is there anything in this new franchise agreement that would negatively impact the one that we already have with the other?
No, that is,
major,
so, just to be very clear, there isn't a franchise agreement for the council today, and the council cannot issue a franchise agreement until at least 7 days after the public hearing on it.
okay.
So we're just, having a discussion, sort of hypothetically. The draft that I have reviewed is very, very, very similar to the Newtel or Newcom or whatever the company, the existing franchise. There are a couple of differences that I think that you fairly characterized as maybe reflecting changes in how construction is happening. I don't see, from my initial review of that, as those being problematic under the statute. There's a couple more that I'm looking at. I don't think they're an issue, but like I said, the only limitations upon the language of the franchise that can be issued, the only limitations of the existing franchise are in those 5 areas, and those areas are very, very consistent between the two drafts, so I don't see that being a problem. And then even if Newcom or the existing Zoom did have an issue with it, it could be possibly something that would be amended. If they had an issue with it, we could maybe amend their franchise so that they had similar terms.
Sure, okay.
But that's...
And because we do this, and I'm in-house at Jaguar, so I work with all of our franchise agreements. I'm pretty familiar with what the case law says when there have been disputes about whether one franchise is violative of the competitive language restrictions and things like that. So we took great pains to make sure that what we proposed to Mr. Sullivan was as close to a mirror image as is practical given current construction standards and timing, that it still has the same protections for the city. There's one difference that I'm sure he'll talk to you about later, that's a performance bond. We've provided language for major construction bonds during any substantial periods of construction, and there's significant insurance for property damage. We did remove language related to an ongoing performance bond that just exists throughout the whole term of the franchise, but that doesn't leave the city unprotected because of the substantial construction period performance bonds and the property damage insurance that runs, into the millions of dollars. And so that would be one example where there is a difference in the language. It's not one of those competitive areas where the language has to be the same on its face, and it's also not something that we would anticipate there would be significant objection to, but it might be one of those things that gets massaged. Realistically, once we're done running in main lines or doing substantial construction, if there's a new development, we need to go in and run main line. Once we're done with periods of substantial construction, the only time we're really running through the right-of-way is to run that drop from the main line to your house. So we go through 3 feet of right-of-way, 10 feet of right-of-way. So those periods, there really isn't substantial damage because we're not in the right-of-way. So those are the periods that we propose just leaving the insurance requirements in there. Still keeps the city protected. It would be the same franchise fees, it would be the same sort of build-out requirements, so nothing in those competitive areas.
All right, perfect. All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
If not, I'll look for a motion to approve Resolution 8-27-18-23, ordering the publication of a public hearing and notice of intent to consider issuance of franchise.
That motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
A motion, a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. All right, planning and zoning, 6C, 6.3, text amendment to ordinance 215, land uses ordinance 223.
Yeah, I guess I'll start with this. What we have here is basically a correction to an ordinance that was approved in April of last year. If you remember right, we had a couple developments that came through a couple of years ago, it was the Hidden Creek additions and that new Coldwater Crossing addition. And they went through the planned residential development process. And the reason they went through that is because they were basing their development on the previously approved plan, which since that time zoning has changed. So as we went through those, we realized that the zoning ordinance itself actually had a planned unit development overlay district and a planned residential development district. And they basically accomplished the same thing, but there was two different districts within the ordinance. So what we looked at doing was combining those ordinances into one to kind of clarify what's actually being requested. So we went through the public hearing with the planning commission, and the city council approved that ordinance last spring. Something that we noticed as we have a new request, the Coldwater Crossing 8th edition, we looked at the ordinance, and for whatever reason, we don't know exactly what happened, there was a section missing in the actual ordinance that was signed off on and approved. And so what we're looking here is to just include that section in there. The language was drafted last year, but for whatever reason it was missing in the packet, and then the wrong ordinance got signed. So the ordinance that we're looking at, or the language that we're looking at, if you're looking in my staff report, is starting on page 9. It's under letter G, preliminary and final PUD plan approval required. And really what it was the process of how a plan unit development gets processed, which includes the public hearing, the preliminary plan, the final PUD review plan, the public hearing notice requirements, and that goes up to the top of page 10. So it's really about a one page that's missing out of that ordinance. So we're just asking you to take a look at this and reapprove the new ordinance, what's the number here? 223, and that will include that section, that was supposed to be in there last year. So we're just looking for a corrective.
So did this section go to the planning commission and they saw it and it got missed
I
as
believe
we
it was all
signed it?
reviewed, I know we did some research on that.
So, yeah, when we realized that, when we were trying to figure out what happened, right? When there was an ordinance that was signed that looked like a draft that was signed, because there was language in there that said insert something here, you know what I mean? I tried to find the easiest way to rectify the issue. It was looking like an administrative mistake, something that's just a typo, something that happened in the packet. We went back, Maggie and I did a little bit digging through the history of how this happened. So there was a planning commission public hearing that reviewed the correct copy of the ordinance on April 4th, 2017. So zoning hearings happened.
Including this section?
Yes.
Okay.
The language that, the proposed language, John had a staff report in the April 24th, 2017, that they went through, and there was discussion about making these changes. So then the disconnect happened in that a draft was signed. That draft was actually published, and not even in summary form, in an entirety. So, what we would need to happen here would be to have the correct version enacted, and then we would, draft up the summary.
To put it back in the paper?
Yeah, and then the way that, so this language replaces the incorrect version that was passed back in 2017 with what the intention of it was, which was to have a more so there were different processes between the PRD zone and the PUD zone, and this took the best bits from both of those and unified them into one process, into a PUD overlay, which is an easier zoning type to administer, because you can overlay that type of zone over existing zones, as opposed to having to rezone things.
To redo them.
Right.
But to be clear, council has already approved this change as it's laid out before us tonight.
Yes.
But when it went into record, it was the draft, it was not the.
It was missing that section. I'm not sure if the wrong, because there was different drafts of the ordinance as we were going through this, it took us a few months. And somehow I think the older version of the draft got added in the packet and got signed, so I'm not exactly sure how that went down.
So as we went through those minutes of the 2017 meeting, we were just trying to figure, we weren't here at the time, Maggie wasn't here at the time. We were just trying to find out what may have happened. I know that there was a lot of changes going on in the administrator's office at that time. That was the same meeting that an interim administrator was appointed. Something happened, and the wrong version.
Okay. So the right version went to planning, the right version came to us.
Yes.
The right version was a part of the public hearing, and then came to us.
Yep.
And,
But the wrong
but what got
version was
published.
and was published.
Okay, all right.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep. Sure does. All right, is there a resolution for this, Maggie, or is this, what are we?
Oh, yeah, there's ordinance, the new ordinance number would be 223, sorry, so then you'd be essentially passing the new ordinance with the new language.
With the correct language.
The correct language,
Right,
yeah.
not necessarily new.
Or new, correct.
Can you, I don't have the ordinance here
Right
in front of
here.
me, can you pull it up? Thank you. All right, I'll look for motion to approve ordinance 223, amending, Title 15, land usage, Chapter 152 zoning, Section 152.050.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, both of you. All right, then we'll go to 6C, number 2, comprehensive plan.
Yes, I'll go through this as well. So, basically every 10 years, every jurisdiction within the 7-county metro area is required to update the comprehensive plan to the Metropolitan Council. And we're going through that process with the city mayor right now, as is all the other counties and cities within the area. Basically, earlier this year, we did ask for an extension on the deadline to push that into 2019. Originally, these comp plans were supposed to be approved at the end of this year and December 31st, 2018. As many cities have done, they've asked for the extension, that's in place. So now we're at a point where the last couple of years with the planning commission, we've been reviewing this plan, all the chapters and maps, that we have a draft ready to be looked at for approval by the city council to be able to send out to the neighboring jurisdictions for review. This would include, the townships, the county, basically everybody in the vicinity, and then the Metropolitan Council. It's a mandatory 6-month review process that would go through. So what we have is a draft format. Once that review process is done and any comments that come back, any changes are made, the plan would be to hold an open house where we'd actually go through the entire process of the comp plan, everything. We invite the public to that. And after that open house, would actually be a public hearing where the city council can officially take action to approve the comprehensive plan. So what we're looking for tonight is just approval of the draft to be sent off. I know as of last week, we already met with the Carter County Transportation people. There's a couple little tweaks that will be made to a couple of the maps. Nothing major on intent, but as we go through this next 6-month process, I'm sure there'll be little changes. But we need to kind of get that rough draft going for that mandatory 6-month review. So with that being said, I can kind of go through some of the comp plan a little bit if you want. Just kind of discuss what we're looking at here. Metropolitan Council does require specific chapters to be included in the plan itself. And going through the table of contents, we have an introduction chapter, just kind of gives you some history and stuff of the city itself. We have the land use chapter, which is a big one that has all the natural resource information, the future land use, existing land use, and then forecast for community designation, which would be like population trends, projections, and different things like that. Chapter 3 is transportation chapter, and this shows all the future roadways, alignments, different, county jurisdictions, things like that. Chapter 4 is the water resources management plan. This includes surface water management, water, and sanitary sewer. Just to let you know, Bolton Mink has worked with us on the land use, the transportation, this water resources chapter. So they've put together a lot of the language for those chapters, as part of this process. Moving into chapter 5, we have the parks and trails chapter. And this includes kind of future layout, locations for park as future development occurs, different trail locations, things of that nature. Chapter 6 is the housing chapter, and this kind of goes through, housing affordability, housing issues, different things that need to be looked at from a housing standpoint. It looks at age of structures, different things of that nature. Chapter 7 is actually a new chapter that the Metropolitan Council is requiring. It's resilience, and what this has to do with is kind of going green, basically what a lot of people call how to save from an energy standpoint. You can get as detailed as different light bulbs and street lights and things like that. We don't have a lot of that individual detail, but more general policies in that nature. Chapter 8, I know this was talked about earlier, but the economic competitiveness chapter, and this talks about key industries, terms of employment, development, redevelopment, the education and workforce, talks about different initiatives and things like that, so it goes through that whole range of stuff with economic development. Chapter 9 is finally the implementation chapter, and this just talks about implementation tools that can be used for these different chapters, and then implementation strategies by chapter. So each chapter we have policies and goals and things of that nature to look at. Overall, all these chapters do tie together, and for instance, the land use kind of goes with transportation, so we're putting low density kind of on the local roads, more intense density like commercial or industrial, potentially on higher traffic county roads or the State Highway 25. That also ties in with the parks and trails, so we are looking at putting trails potentially down major roadways and connecting trails through park areas within new developments and things like that. So there's a lot of correspondence between each of these chapters as we move forward. Now, I don't know how much we want to get into everything specifically in the plan itself, but the introduction chapter basically goes through each of those sections. It does talk about the history and regional setting of the city itself, has a planning framework. There's obviously a few dates that will have to be filled in as we go through it, approval dates and things like that. The land use chapter, I kind of want to talk a little bit about this. But basically, as we go through that, there's a lot that discusses, the housing and, not the housing, but the population projections and things like that. If you want to look at specific, tables and things like that, it's in that chapter, the projections. It compares Mare to a lot of the other townships and cities within the Carver County. So you can kind of look and see where things are at from that standpoint. And then it does get into, if I can find that right table here about the actual population. Okay, local population trends, this is on page 9. It just talks about where Mare has gone from 2000, the population was 554, to a 2016 estimate of 1,995. So it has increased. Actually, within the county itself, it's the fastest growing communities in that time period by percentage base. There's other communities that have grown by more numbers, but percentage-wise, we are the fastest. So that's definitely something to take a look at. We have a table on page 10 that talks about new building permits. Obviously, through the 90s, things were fairly slow, and you had this major rush. Permits starting in about 2001, kind of went through about 2007, then you had the recession years, and over the last couple of years, you're starting to increase that again. One thing that we've looked at over the next 20, 40-year period, if you average about 25 homes a year, you're going to have some years higher, some years lower, that'll get you about where your projections are going to be based. Now, those last couple of years, for instance, 2017, we kind of had a number of 35. I think we're over 40 this year, if I'm not mistaken. So we're already above those projections. Now, I'm sure over the next 20-some years, we might have a few years below it, but that's kind of where we're looking at going with that. And then the last table that I wanted to touch on was the population projections, this is on page 14. And this kind of compares Mayor to the rest of the area. And basically, the estimate for 2040 for the city of Mayor is 2,950 people, which is about 1,200 people that grow here in that time period. Now, with the way things have gone here in the last couple of years, that could be on the low side, but it's way down from what it previously was in the last comp plan update. That's a percentage increase of 47.9. And as you can see, Cologne is projected to grow quite a bit larger. Some of the bigger communities like Laconia is about going to double in population, so they're really seeing some major growth. The big areas of the county itself, the Victoria, Chaska, Chanhassen area, are going to see major growth as well, but those are not included. They're more of the true suburban feel versus you kind of got these outlying rural growth centers like the city of Mayor. So as you can see, that's kind of the growth there. As we move through this chapter, we get into the land use, and I want to kind of get into the future land use a little bit. And I think it's on page 39 is what we're looking at. This is a guided land use in acres, and it basically guides things out from a 2020 to a 2030 to a 2040 period. One thing that we kind of struggled with, and Dave kind of mentioned this, but Sarah in his office, and I went through this a lot, is trying to get the numbers to work to actually meet the Met Council projections of 3 units per acre from new development. And a lot of the development happening in Mayor is considered low density, but to get that 3, you typically got to go with some higher density townhomes, apartments, or something like that somewhere or another. And the problem is they want to require staging areas. Well, Mayor being a smaller town doesn't have the major growth that say a city like Laconia or Chaska may see, so it basically limited. Well, this 10 years, you might only have 3 properties that be in a staging area, which artificially inflates values, whether somebody else that may be ready to go right next to it, they're not in that staging area. So what we did with the Met Council is get rid of the staging area altogether, and actually looked at the entire time period, and just said anywhere within this area can grow, as long as it's feasible from the sewer, water, street, connection, things like that. And we basically kind of broke that up as, in this time period, we have to have this many acres. It doesn't matter where those acres go, so we're not specifically putting that, directly on there. So we kind of went through that and did the acreage for basically each density. Only one change we had to make from the planning commission's official recommendation. One other thing that came up is we don't have our orderly annexation agreements renegotiated with the townships, which is something we did 10 years ago approximately. And by doing that, we did kind of change our growth area. It used to extend way down Highway 7 to the east, like 1 1/4 miles. Well, that's probably not very realistic, so what we did is we kind of pulled that back and kind of circled the community a little bit more, added some areas down in the southeast and southwest area, but took away that area way down on Highway 7, which is, from this point, about 2 miles away from sewer and water, which just isn't realistic. And by doing that, some of the areas got pushed outside the orderly annexation areas, and per Met Council requirements, we're not able to include that in until we renegotiate our orderly annexation agreement. So, doing our staging and getting our 3 units per acre, we did have to change a couple of properties in the west side of town. And what we did is we kind of consider this as kind of a temporary change to get through the process, renegotiate the orderly annexation, and then maybe change that back at that point. And if we can find, this would be the future land use map, it'd be like page 42 or 43. Yes, right there. Maybe I'll just get up here and show you in person. So what we did is, you can see these areas right here, and way over on this side of town. Those are the areas that we're actually pulling out of the growth area that were previously in it. And we added areas in. This purple line's the current growth boundary. We added areas in, like over here, some areas down there, and a little bit over in this vicinity. So basically, we're swapping out these areas, this area for these areas down here, which are more feasible. And as you recall, we did have a concept plan for this property, a month or so ago, so we do have some potential interest down there. The other areas that we're looking at that are not in here are these areas right here, which are in a kind of hash mark area. And the reason we included those with that designation is because they're currently owned by the developer at Coldwater Crossing. He's purchased all those properties. Now, what his exact plans are, we're not 100% sure yet, but realistically, the river kind of runs through here, so these areas could be serviced very easily by sewer and water in the very near future, if you so desire. So we do want to include that. These 3 parcels here were actually in Camden Township. There is no orderly annexation agreement with that township at all. So we couldn't technically include that, but we kinda have a separate designation for those couple areas, saying we do plan on this, we do plan to negotiate that. And this area here is a lot of floodplain, but there are a couple little pockets of high ground, so you can maybe get a, a few lots here or there. And we're planning for that with, the cold water case petition, which is currently submitted right now, which basically fucks up with this property. And the planning commission will be reviewing that the next meeting in September, so. But the other area I mentioned that we did change was this area over here. We showed it as low density through the planning commission process, I know Les can probably recall that, but we had to adjust it to some medium and high density to be able to meet their criteria. What we wanted to do was add this area in over here, but we legally couldn't per the Met Council because it's outside of our current orderly annexation boundary. So, once we renegotiate those agreements, this area could easily be added in, just to go back to lower density, we'd meet our criteria at that point. But for the time being, we get through it, and we talked to Met Council quite a bit, there's not a whole lot we could do to satisfy them on the number of all changes.
It's kind of set like this till we can get some of those orderly
Yeah, so
annexations.
like I said, this purple boundary just has to be negotiated, so we're, like I said, we're moving this stuff around. Now, the unique thing about Mayor is we have 4 townships,
Right.
which makes it, a lot of other communities only have 1, which is close around. So we have a lot of different, agreements to work with. In this case, there's some Watertown Township that might go to the, Laconia Township stuff, but, based on feasibility of water, sewer, different things like that, that's all gonna come into play. Other than that, one other thing I'll make a point on, currently in the zoning ordinance, we don't have an industrial district. We have a commercial industrial district, not a true industrial district. The plan is to kind of designate some land through this area as actually industrial, which means one of the conditions in this chapter will be to eventually add an industrial zoning district to your zoning ordinance. So that was something that would come after the comp plan approval. And we still kind of show these commercial industrial areas, along, this would be the current Trunk Highway 25 corridor. And this area over here is the future Trunk Highway 25 bypass, which goes approximately up through here, and then kind of comes up into this location. That's been shifted from the previous route, which was approved, which basically runs right through this area right there. Planning Commission talked about this for quite a while. We met with the county, with Minnesota Department of Transportation about this. They have no long-term, or even short-term plans, or really even long-term plans for that bypass to happen. But as the community develops, there is a need for a north-south collector road over there. So for the time being, as property develops in that vicinity, we at least have this corridor shown on our plans. We will dedicate right away as part of those plats, that someday when enough of that gets developed, and this may be a couple decades down the road, we do have a corridor there that could potentially be transferred over to the county or even the state at that point. I know one thing we met with last week is that long-term 25 may get pushed over to this area from the state highway, and this would be turned back to the county. And then if this bypass happens out here, this may get turned back to the city, and this would become the county route. So there's a lot of things that were discussed. There's also discussion of 30, and as it continues over to the east. Right now, we show plans with the transportation plan chapter that would bring 30 along here, eventually up and then cross at the river crossing. So there's a lot of different things that will come into play. These things don't have to be figured out specifically right now, but in the future, as development does occur, we have to have a plan in place to at least get the designated right away we need, so.
Okay.
So those are a couple of big items, in the land use chapter. Without getting into a lot more details on that. The next chapter is the transportation chapter. The big item there is the Trunk Highway 25 bypass, and then we do show quite a few roadways that'll be kind of collector roads. One other thing we discussed with the county last week is actually adjusting the designation on a couple of the county roads to an urbanizing designation versus a rural. And what that allows for is to have spacing with their intersections every quarter mile for a full intersection and eighth a mile for a right in, right out versus a half a mile. As we develop and urbanize the city sewer and water, we're gonna need those closer spacings. The county thought that was a great idea to do that. So within our growth area, they did say they would change those designations to urbanizing to allow those additional intersections through the basic county road there. So that was one thing that we discussed last week. And then moving forward, there's, the engineering with the sewer treatment facilities and the water treatment facilities. Once again, Bolton and Mink kind of addressed that. I don't know if Dave has anything specific to add about those chapters or not, or the transportation chapter, but.
No, I guess the one thing I'll say is, last time we went through this exercise, we were planning for a much bigger population than we are right now, so, a lot of this was just kind of readjusting it and scaling it back a little bit from what we had already planned for.
Yeah, so those chapters were adjusted, we have those included there for the water resources chapters. And as we move on, the next chapter is 5, let's get way down there, that is the parks chapter. And basically here again, we kind of looked at this and we went through all the developing areas, for future residential uses and kind of looked for future parks. We tried to space out, neighborhood parks within a vicinity. I know one, for instance, the Coldwater Crossing, there's been talk about a park in that area. We don't show one in this current Coldwater Crossing, because based on that development, they have set aside their park dedication by paying a fee, 8-10 years ago or what that was. But we did show one directly kind of on the western boundary, so people on that western area of Coldwater Crossing could eventually use that for neighborhood park. The people on the east side can eventually go to Old Schoolhouse Park, for their uses. And one big part about that is with this with trails, we're looking at connecting all these parks together with trails. So we actually have some of that will be coming up in this new development procedure, Coldwater Crossing, with some discussion there. So we're already putting these maps kind of into play with the current development that's going through the process right now. So, as we go through this in these future areas, if they show a designated park in that vicinity, we'll look at that time. Doesn't mean it has to go specifically in that location. Plans can come in, they maybe give a new idea, we can adjust things around, same with road alignments or things like that. The planned unit development stuff we just talked about prior to this, there can be developments that come in that change what they wanna do as far as usages or, mixed uses, all different things there, so. So moving on to the parks, this would be about page 25. Here's some of the maps. I think it's the last map, 5, 6, I believe is the number. I don't know if you can zoom that out at all, but.
I'll try.
This is kind of the overall park, trail, and open space plan. And what it shows is, the growth area itself that we've designated in the future land use chapter. And we've got different, parks. Like there's a trail map that shows future trails and sidewalks. If you go down, the last one shows all the parks, the proposed parks, all the trails and sidewalks, all the proposed trails. It's kind of hard to see, but it kind of gives you an idea. We've got neighborhood parks, which are the bigger circles, community parks, which are, really big circles, and you got some of the browner ones, which might be a natural area. These could be floodplain areas, wooded features, wetlands, that are undevelopable based on the land use there, but can be part of an open space type, natural setting where you may have a trail that goes through there, and we are actually looking at some of that with this Coldwater Crossing. So, basically it looks at all the future growth areas and designates things, and what we try to do is get these circles to overlap as much as possible, so everywhere is serviced within, say, a half a mile without having to walk, like the child doesn't have to walk a mile to a park, which we do a little bit of that in the community right now. For the most part, that's the main plan, and all those dashed lines are the trail connections. And a lot of that was looked at for future, like over an aerial photo to look at where we connect these natural areas, where we connect parks, how we connect existing trails into new developments and different things like that, how we can put these on the roadway system. So all minor collectors, major collectors, arterial roads will have a trailway on that road system, which is shown on this map. So this ties directly in to future land use and where residential development goes, and directly into the transportation area on those corridors, those main roadways, to have these systems in place. So that's kind of the main thing with the parks and trail chapter. The housing chapter is chapter 6, kind of touched on this briefly already. Just kind of talks about a lot of background information with the city. Talks about housing stock. Obviously, a lot of the housing stock, if you look at it, there's a map in there. This is on page 7. This map basically shows you the age of the housing within the community. It's kind of interesting to look at. Here it is right here, because you can kind of see as the community developed, you have your downtown area, the old area of Mayor, and kind of sprawled out directly to the east, and areas like that. And now, over the last 10, 15 years, you've got these new developments on the outskirts, which are where the major growth has taken place over the last 15 or 20 years or so. So it kind of gives you an idea of, where this growth has occurred and how it's kind of over time spread out like that. One other thing I'll say about housing and kind of with the population, Mayor is also the youngest community in Carver County from an age standpoint. And what that tells you is you have a lot of young families that have moved here, pre-recession, based on housing prices being affordable, that they can't afford does is it does put a lot of kids into your community, which a lot of communities don't have. So we do have a very young population, and by thinking about that, then you need to look at things like parks and what we, what this is starting to happen. I think some new development happening, again, it's kind of seeing that same trend all over again. People are starting to push further out in new homes and new construction right now, again, because once again, it's a price point thing, and the closer you get in, the more expensive things get. So that's kind of another neat little thing when you look at it, read through all these details, that's kind of spelled out in there. Moving on to chapter 7 real quick, the resiliency chapter. Basically, what we're looking at here is basically an introduction. It talks about disaster preparedness, protecting critical infrastructure, diversifying the energy supply, cybersecurity, proactive planning, water resources, community and economic cohesion. There's a lot of different things that we kind of touch on. It's not a real long chapter. For instance, page 3 has City of Mayor growth solar potential. I know we had a solar discussion not too long ago about some problems just outside of the city itself, but the Met Council is looking at this for every community now. Obviously, a lot of these areas do not apply because of zone potential residential and things like that, but just kind of gives you a city or an idea of, some solar potential for, future things of that nature. Cybersecurity is another one that's becoming a bigger issue every year with the hacking and different things, and keeping your facilities, safe from that standpoint. There's also things about the water supply system and, keeping things, safe from that standpoint. You can have people that can affect the water supply or shut things down from the sewer plant capacity and different things like that. So it's stuff that is touched on in your plan here. Going into the last chapter then, chapter 8 I should say, is the economic competitiveness chapter. Once again, this just talks about, businesses within there. Without going through a lot of details, it talks about forecast employment. There is employment being forecasted, so I mean, there is going to be job growth here over the next 20-some years. So we do take that into account. It's one of the things that our council requires us to look at. So when we do a comp plan, we don't just plan for residential, we have to plan for future commercial, future industrial. As a concept plan we had on the east side of town not too long ago, it did show some future industrial property which is being proposed. Those types of lots could bring in new businesses, which could bring in jobs to this community, which could bring in potential residential development. So, all this, like I said, is kind of brought together. And as we look at the last chapter, the implementation chapter, basically that just kind of gives an overview of each chapter. It talks about official controls, which is the zoning ordinance. We're always kind of constantly looking at that and changing different things here and there. Capital improvement plan, I know Dave has something on the water treatment facility capital improvement plan tonight. That's another tool that you have in the city. Intergovernmental coordination. There's different things like grants. For instance, Rod brought up a grant for those items for the fire department earlier tonight that we received. So things like that can come into play. Like I said, each chapter has different things to look at, policy, goals, and actions. So, kind of a very real brief overview. I think when we get to the public hearing and open house after the official review by the counties and everybody, we'll have a little more detail to it. But for tonight, unless you have specific questions, I guess we're looking for approval from the board.
Great, thank you. Thank you for the overview. All right, so any other questions for John? Then I'll look for a motion to approve the draft comp plan to be sent out for the 6-month review.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? So first, I want to, John, thanks for your work, all your work on this. Dave, you also from your, but certainly the Planning and Zoning Commission, they put a lot of work into this, so I appreciate all the efforts. Obviously, it's a big document, big draft. I mean, a lot of work went into it, so great job. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. That'll take us to 6C3, Comprehensive Plan Grant Agreement Amendment.
Okay, so this grant agreement is it's just an amendment, because the city, as part of the comp plan, we did get some assistance through the Met Council to update our comprehensive plan, and so the agreement essentially just says that, as part of this grant agreement, we've asked for an extension to our, to complete our comp plan, and I think we already went through that process of submittal. We're just asking for, I think, a 3-month extension of our, 6-month review. So, they just wanted us to approve, as part of that, a grant amendment that would kind of state our new extension, within the grant agreement. So, essentially in front of you is just an amendment to the agreement, and then kind of the revised attachment A, which is our, right here. It's just kind of showing how long we were thinking each month would take, and at what point we would have it completed by. So, that is the new schedule that we got approved by the Met Council, and looks, as John went through it tonight, we're through the draft phase, and now we're able to then send it out for the 6-month review. So they just needed an update for the grant purposes, so.
An update for an additional extension.
Right, they just needed to amend the grant agreement to show that we applied for an extension to our comp plan. So the agreement just shows that we got the extension.
Okay. The extension a year ago. We're not asking for a new extension.
No, not a new extension, just that we're amending their contract for the grant.
And
to
so
show
we're still
that
looking good with our schedule and this extension request, we're still on track for that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, we're pretty close on that, and it's gonna come down to the wire, but once we get this plan out here in the next few weeks,
Yep.
technically a 6-month review that will take place, and then we have, maybe 2 months or a month to kind of go
Okay.
through that final.
So this is just following up on some paperwork, getting it
Right.
set and.
Right, just following up with amending the grant that we received, the agreement for that, so.
All right, so look for motion to approve the comprehensive plan grant agreement amendment with Met Council. We have a motion, we have a second.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That will take us to 6D1, crosswalks.
This is a separate attachment.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a motion approving the purchase of the pedestrian crossing signs and radar speed sign. Put together, I kind of combined it both into one proposal, and they kind of go hand in hand. All right, attached are quotes from TAPCO on 3 different types of lighted crosswalk signs. The city engineer has received approval from MnDOT to install these signs at the crosswalks on Highway 25 and Hickory Boulevard. Due to poor visibility issues and light pole placement, the city engineer doesn't recommend placing any lighted crosswalk signs at the crosswalk on Highway 25 and 4th Street Northeast until these issues can be resolved. It is recommended that the city purchase the solar-powered rectangular rapid flashing beacon LED crosswalk warning system due to the fact that it is the most effective than other crosswalk warning systems. So quote 1 was for the recommended crosswalk warning system, and that is for the 2 lighted signs on each side of the crosswalk, and the price came in at $9,004.89. Quote 2 is for an LED blinker sign with a push button activation, and it came in at $5,950.32. I met with a representative from TAPCO, and we talked about both options. There's studies that prove that the rapid flashing LED crosswalk warning system is the most 80% effective in most situations. It slows traffic down 80% of the time. And there's also a study I attached from MnDOT that put together on advanced crosswalk warning systems, and they stated the exact same thing. The LED blinker sign, it's a sign, I've included some pictures in there as well. It's a sign with LEDs, lights that kind of wrap all the way around it, and then it's a push button activated.
You have the
But-
pictures in, Maggie?
Oh, yeah, I can just,
There's button, so that's the one that's being recommended. Waconia put in these, Montrose has put in these, a lot of surrounding cities are going with this type of system. It is easily maintained, it comes with a little control box that's easy to do maintenance and everything on it, and that sort of thing. But the next one down, that's still the same one, that's kind of the specs on the whole thing. Here's the rapid flash, and you can see the picture on the side where it flashes around the sign. Push button activation. It's a cheaper sign, however, it's not as effective. And if you don't have it positioned, if you're kind of not in the right position at the same time, they're LED lights. So LED lights, kind of like our Christmas lights. If you're not like looking at the snowflake kind of right on, it kind of looks like half of it's not working. So it's kind of the same thing. So, hence the reason why it's not as effective. And that is with push button activation was with the quote. And then the bottom quote, quote number 3, is for just the LED blinker sign that flashes 24/7. However, I don't believe MnDOT approved it without the push button activation. That was just the quote that they gave me. So, Dave, I don't know if you have anything you wanna touch base on that.
No, we got questions for Mayo.
Do these quotes come with installation?
Not installation. City staff would have to do the
So
installation.
what kind of costs are associated with that?
For the top, it'd be sonotubes and concrete. You'd have to cement it in, which would be, a couple $100. I mean, we can do that in-house pretty reasonably, so.
That'll be the same cost for either, for.
Yeah, for
quote
the
one or quote
LED,
two?
it's not as, I think it does come with a 13-foot pole, and then it has to be mounted properly, and then the solar panel on top, so it has to have certain restrictions and everything, so.
So quote number 1, the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, are those like going 24/7 or what
They're
activates them?
push button activation.
Only?
So- Correct.
Okay.
So if someone comes to it, they gotta activate it.
And then, does the quote, is that for the back-to-back one, or is it for the single-sided?
I believe so. I was gonna double check on that. But there is, I got a price book. The light bar, there's 4 of them, 4 light bars. So that is front and back.
That'll be back-to-back.
Yep. And that is, the rapid flashing, Waconia, like I said, Waconia has them, a few other cities have them. And yeah, it's like having a squad car, kind of the same flashing lights as what a squad car would have.
Any further questions for Kyle?
I can, if you want me to, I can read about I kind of separated them from the two, but I got the radar speed sign.
Should we keep them as separate?
That's up to you if you,
Let's do them as separate items.
Okay, yep.
So if no questions on this, if someone would like to make a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion to, accept the first quote, the recommended rectangular rapid flash beacon LED crosswalk.
I'll second.
We have a motion, a second, any further discussion?
What was the deal with Fourth Street? The poles aren't in right?
We have a light pole on the west side of the street that's like right in line where a crosswalk sign should be. So it's kind of, and then with the hill being there and everything, it's just kind of, it's an intersection that we kind of need to either look at with bump outs or look at moving the crosswalk entirely. I have a plan. Say that again.
We'll work with MnDOT when they come through town to get all the other pedestrian facilities up to where they should be to address that intersection. Or evaluate whether or not that's the correct place for it, or if there's somewhere else that makes more sense.
Right.
Any other discussion?
What's the lifespan on it, you know?
I'm not entirely sure. I know that there's a decent warranty on them, I know that. I can't remember that off the top of my head.
Thought it was a 2-year, maybe that was the.
I think it's a 2-year, 3-year on something, and then another.
Typically, a sign will last 10 years.
Batteries and the.
I don't.
Yeah, I think the batteries had a warranty, the solar panel had a warranty, and then there's like 3 different, warranties.
And when, are these a stock item? Is this a couple months lead time? What's the lead time on getting these?
I'm not sure on that either. I'm assuming it's kind of a stocked item, but, couple weeks, I would think we would be able to get it pretty quick.
Thinking of something will still get put in this fall.
Yeah. Yep. I'm not sure what the voltage is on it.
655, is that what you said?
Well, it's a 12-volt solar panel, 55 watt, and I mean, as far as. Yeah.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's go to the speed signs.
All right. Council also instructed staff to get quotes on portable radar speed signs. Staff reached out to the city of Waconia, or city of Watertown, to get feedback on the radar speed sign that they purchased a couple years ago. It was recommended that we purchase a solar-powered speed sign to avoid. They recommended that we purchase a solar panel speed sign to avoid having to. They recommended that we purchase a solar-powered speed sign with solar power one, so we don't have to change the battery every week. It is also recommending that we purchase the data collection and reporting feature. The software will allow city to track speed, car count, number of violations, et cetera. There's a few things that it can do. Overall, Watertown is very pleased with the product, and it plans on purchasing 3 more in the future. Attached are 2 quotes on 2 different types of systems. One is Bluetooth ready, which is Bluetooth. You can set the speed, and set all the other parameters of it. And then you can also document how many violations there were and that sort of thing. And then the second quote is for, it's Bluetooth, and it has a cloud service for 1 year. And the cloud service is kind of neat. You can actually set the sign in stealth mode, so it looks like it's off, and then it'll actually track speeds. So you can track speeds of people just currently, driving through it, and then you can actually then turn it on to see if it's actually being effective or not. So, for that, it's $3,130.25.
After the first.
And then after the first year, they're trying to work on not having an expense. I emailed the guy back today wondering what that annual cost would be, but the cost just to set up on the sign was about $900 for the cloud service. But they're working to get it at a more reasonable rate. But if we decide that we don't want to keep with the cloud service, it'll just go back to a Bluetooth system.
Just cancel that.
Correct.
Where are you planning on putting this?
It's a portable, wherever you guys,
Put it wherever you-
wherever you guys want us to put it.
Will it be a trailer, or is it just gonna be attached to sign mount?
Attached to signs, that'd be another question for MnDOT if we can put it on a MnDOT sign or not, but,
We could put it on a standalone pole.
We could.
Similar to what Waconia does, coming around the lake.
right. As long as
Okay.
we just gotta make it anti-theft so people don't run off with it type thing. So.
Right.
Mhm.
And how about all the data? Who's gonna crunch all the data? Or what are we gonna do with the, are we,
More importantly, what are you gonna do with the data?
yeah.
I know, is it
Right.
necessary to have,
You can do with Bluetooth, right? So we can share.
That's completely up to you guys. I'm fine either way. I know Watertown likes it because they're kind of tracking areas kind of around town, so.
We may get,
That is an option, but of course it's more. You can have it even set, so if you have a high speeder coming through town, it'll email someone that a high speeder came through town at this time, but I figure people will just start messing with
and
it.
these go out all seasons, no problem in the winter.
Yeah,
but
yep.
They just, okay.
Mhm.
All right, Any other questions for Kyle? If anyone would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to purchase, the first one, the solar radar speed sign with Bluetooth.
For $2,657.25?
Yep.
We have a motion, do we have a second? We have a motion, a second, any further discussion?
Gary was going to find out if the county still has theirs, to see that they would come and bring that up for us at no charge. I
Yeah.
understand that we wouldn't have access to it all the time, but, seems like it's a low-cost option to have speed trailer here.
I would prefer to table it to see what Gary Stolke has to say.
Yeah.
I did ask Gary about it too, about a week or two ago, so.
I tend to think the same. I mean, we haven't explored that, at least gotten it out here and see how it works. I mean, but if we can't even get an answer if it works or not, but, I would tend to at least try that first and see what we can do, and I think we'll end up getting to this point, my gut tells me, but I think we should explore that trailer first myself too, so.
You can put these in neighborhoods really something that people are coming to too much.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
right
the-
now it's the major highway that through.
And that's a nice thing, and I think we're gonna end up getting like Watertown, getting more than one of them eventually too, for that reason, and getting them in certain neighborhoods around too, I think they'll be beneficial for that, but I personally like to try the,
I think we talked about a speed trailer, but it has to be removed at night and stored and locked up. So it was, we explored that option too, and I think it was just not as easy to get, so
it's true.
some different conversations that Public Works would have to go and get the trailer in the evening at the end of the day, which
Is that locking it up,
bedroom,
or is that
we're-
hauling it? Do you have to haul that back to a shed, or do you just
We-
put a padlock on it?
We did in the past, I think it has enough power where we could leave it overnight if we needed to. That was just, the deputy was, he wanted me to kinda just put it out when I got it and take it back when I left that, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, so. But I think if I remember right, I think we could leave it out and just have it locked up, and we just it has to charge overnight is kind of the deal, so.
Right.
'Cause it runs off of like a car battery, so.
And Public Works is done at 3:30 in the afternoon?
Correct, yep.
Well, that kinda changes my thoughts a little bit of the work, so, all right, any further discussion? We do have a motion and a second, so we'll need to vote on it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Kyle.
Yeah.
All right, 6C, Water CIP, Mr. Martini.
The computer broke, sorry.
No, I do just have some slides though to just kind of walk through some talking points, but, generally speaking, we'll just go through these pretty quick. You should all have hard copies, and an electronic copy of this report. Really, this is the same thing that we did a couple years ago for the sanitary sewer. Yep, I saw it there. We went through the sewer facilities here a couple years ago, and so did the same process now with the water. Like it?
Hold on. What do I do? Okay, sorry. Oh, no.
There you
Okay.
go.
Alright.
So, yeah, so the purpose of what we're trying to do here is, we've gone through, we've looked at the general condition of the water treatment plant and, the supply facilities owned and maintained by the cities. And based on that, we've determined some overall rehabilitation and maintenance needs for the system. and then from that, based on age, condition, kind of useful life of the various pieces of equipment, things that you own, we've gone through, put together a schedule and some planning level cost estimates for you to use going forward, and done that over a long period of time. You wanna go to slide 3 there? So part of this then is there's some capacity expansion, that's laid out in the plan. You have, potentially 2 new wells that you'd be looking at in the future, for an approximate cost of $500,000, converting the pre-settling basin in the plant to a new filter, and then 2, new replacement high service pumps. So those are the things that over time, as you continue to grow, as the use becomes greater, there's some things that you're gonna need to do to the plant to, make that, be able to keep up with your demand.
Right.
The next slide, just kind of walking through then, just kind of giving a general idea of kind of the magnitude of kind of how these costs play out over time. 2020, we've laid out $340,000 worth of needs on the system. Just, again, kind of breaking it down here, this is all these facilities, so, you have a building that needs to be maintained, so you have roofs and doors and windows, or, all those sorts of things that have to be taken care of, that have needs, throughout this planning period. Filter room, your chemical rooms, mechanical rooms. In this, year, the big one is, painting the water tower, which is a big expense. But again, kind of routine maintenance that you have to do as that tower ages.
Is that painting the exterior?
Yes. Yep. Going through, fixing deficiencies. Basically, there's an inspection with it, and, so there's kind of some overall maintenance, and then, recoating it to protect it into the future. Again, this doesn't go every year necessarily with improvements, so, you go fast forward to 2023, getting some big expenses there. The big ones there are some electric and, generator room, needs. And, the next year is, moving all the way forward to 2029, again, $500,000 there. And, the big one there, you kind of can see is the pump room. So a lot of these things, when you start narrowing down the expenses, there's some, relatively speaking, lower cost things, but then you run into some pretty big expenses when you get into certain pieces of equipment. That year might have been wrong there. 2029, $30,000, not much going on there. 2030, $109,000. You have some well work there that, again, starts adding to the total of that. 2032, kind of some more routine maintenance sorts of activities. 2033, again, more routine expenses. And then, again, you get out to 2035 and you're looking at some fairly significant water tower maintenance again. So, that those sorts of things add up. So, again, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this tonight unless, I can answer your questions. I'm sure Kyle can add anything, or more specifics on kind of how the plant operates and some of the things that might be coming up in the near term. But if you go through the report there, at the end, there's kind of that spreadsheet that lays out those expenses and the approximate timing as to when you should be considering that. Hopefully this is a tool now that you can give to your financial advisor to be able to make sure that, as you're looking at your fee structure and your reserves, those sorts of things, that it's set up to be able to accommodate these needs into the future.
Any questions for Dave? And again, this is exactly what we asked for, and, again, another useful tool for us to
Right,
budget.
and that's why a lot of these are coming to you guys tonight, like a lot of these plans, because I am trying to work with our financial advisor to kind of then take all this information and help me do a long-term forecast of what we are going to be, how we're gonna pay for a lot of this stuff. So, that's why I kinda wanted to get all this stuff.
Right.
Unfortunately,
And it's a tool,
longer
it's
than-
fluid, it's not hard set, and as we work through it, but at least we're getting where we need to be. And again, this stuff, what is this now, 17 years old? 16 years old on the wastewater, or on the water
plant
treatment?
isn't,
About 11, 10 years old.
yeah, I was gonna say
Okay.
10, 11 is
Okay.
the water plant.
Yeah, water plant, yeah, wastewater plant's a little older.
Okay.
The main thing I wanna take from this is, well, probably the projects that are gonna come up the fastest is, painting the water tower and coating the water tower, the exterior of it. And then, installing the third filter, that it would be an absolute must, before anything else, I believe. And then also rehabbing well one or drilling a new well. So those are the three main projects that, we'll definitely be focusing on, probably starting next year, so.
So how is this gonna affect our, water and sewer rates going forward?
Yeah, so that's one thing I'm gonna be meeting with, Abdo on this week, because they have had a chance to go through everything, like, our forecast, kind of this document, as well, and they'll kind of hopefully dive into, you know, what our rates are gonna look like based on this
So we
information.
should have that
So-
next meeting?
Yeah, I'm hoping that will be at the September 10th meeting.
Okay.
So.
And hopefully this isn't a shock to the system, or your rates, that, you know, that they're set appropriately to account for ongoing maintenance and operation of the plant. So I would hope that, not to say that there might not have to be some adjustments, but that it isn't a complete
Well, and that's another piece
start
we needed,
over.
Mhm.
and needed to set those rates and why we held them this year,
Mhm.
so we could get some of this information.
Absolutely.
So, again, it's great, great tool, and I appreciate your time on it.
Thanks, David.
Oh, okay.
Didn't they just do the water tower or not too long ago?
Couple years ago.
We did the inside.
inside.
The inside, and I think you cleaned the outside, the last one.
So now this is gonna be both or what?
Just the outside.
Just the outside, that's not that much.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
No, these are expensive pieces of infrastructure to build, and they're expensive to maintain.
And this is to talk through, we don't need to, accept this, do we need a motion to accept?
Is this the final?
Just a draft?
Right now, it's a draft, but I would say, Kyle had some, I would call them more clerical, and just some corrections that he's found, looking through it. I don't think, it doesn't change the overall message that you got tonight. What I would say, maybe it'll be appropriate is for us to get Kyle's comments, make those
Let's do that.
And we can-
edits, and then I would think that you could probably, if you're comfortable with it, even put it on the consent agenda to accept the report as a final.
Yep, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
Perfect, thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Alright.
And then maybe there should be a pavement management,
Yep,
the other one.
pavement management is next.
And if you could, so,
Okay.
So, same concept here, and this one's a little trickier because at least with, you know, your water and sewer, you have a funding source for that, and that it's a service you provide and people pay for that service. The roads are a little bit more tricky because it's a general fund expense, or we have, you know, the new roads when we're reconstructing something. As was mentioned earlier, we have an assessment policy that, can be applied to spread some of those costs to the benefiting properties. So from a funding standpoint, this one gets a little bit trickier. The city has about 10 miles of road. And so, and same thing as with, we're on slide 2 still, Megan.
On.
And, you know, we went out, looked at the general condition of the road, looked at the age of them, and started laying out a plan as, okay, you have 10 miles of road, what is kind of where are we at in the life cycle of those roads and what's coming up next? If you've looked through the report, just kind of walk through some of the routine maintenance and the general life cycle of a road is you build it, generally from a routine maintenance standpoint, we seal the cracks, seal coat the roads, usually a couple times through, the first years, when it's still fairly new. Then when we start getting to be kind of 15, 20 years old, the next thing that we'd be looking at is doing a mill and overlay, where we take off the portion of the surface and repave a portion of the road to really seal it back up, add some structural capacity to it, and, in some cases, kind of smooth out the ride. If you look at some of the older parts of town where things start settling around structures, things like that, it kind of puts it back into shape here. So, the rehabilitation methods, kind of laid out, the various things, where they're applied in the life of the road, and, went through, kind of the pros and cons that each of those add. So, next slide, in there, in that hard copy, we've got a color-coded map in there that lays out, kind of the order in which we think, things need to be addressed. What we're suggesting is that generally speaking, the life of the roads within the next 10 years are all gonna be meet that 20-year-old age, and so would be the appropriate time to start laying out a mill and overlay program where we start, going through town. And then we also have a few roads that, we've overlaid over the last few years, still in pretty decent shape, but at some point we're gonna have to decide, do those need to be reconstructed? Can we reclaim them and just resurface them? What are we gonna do with those? But we have put some cost in there, with the assumption that they would be reconstructed at some time, but that's something we're gonna have to kind of discuss and look at further. Next slide, please, Maggie. So, just to kind of quickly walk you through, the first segment of road that we would recommend that we look at here is those first phases of cold water crossing. If you've been out there, you can kind of see where the cracks are getting pretty wide. The ride of the road's getting a little rough. We have structures that have been patched several times now. So that's getting to an age now that we think that's ready for that. Next slide, Maggie, is 2020. This is one of the roads that potentially needs to be reconstructed. Working with Kyle on this one, this is a road where right now he spends a lot of time and effort and money on 5th Street on the east side there. That was the one road that didn't get reconstructed when we came through in 2007, I think, is when we came through, and you remember that one well.
Well, I remember it.
Yep, that's right.
I had a newborn, and
Yep.
I had to park several houses away.
Yep. So this one hasn't been addressed, so that's one that we have to have a discussion as what is the appropriate thing to do there. It's beyond the condition that we would mill and overlay it, so it's something more significant than that. The costs that we've laid out here are for reconstructing that road. Curb and gutter, storm sewer, again, that may or may not be appropriate or what you want to do. That's the way we've laid out the cost for at least planning and discussion purposes. Next slide, 2021, again, just kind of moving through there, and as you kind of see these different segments, these are kind of a combination of two things. It's when the roads are getting to be, hit that 20-year lifespan, where we're suggesting mill and overlay, and then trying to group them, together to have a fairly uniform sized project each year. 2022, here, again, you're getting now into some more cold water crossing. 2023, this is now starting to get into Hidden Creek, those first years of Hidden Creek. 2024, this one kind of spread out a little around town, but now Sunset Meadows all of a sudden is starting to hit that age. Up there, 7th Street, which is a few years before when we did the reconstructions on the east side of town. 2025, now you're getting into the Fieldstone area, hitting 20 years old. It's kind of interesting when you start looking through this and thinking about that our new stuff is going to be getting to be that age. 2026, again, kind of just a little bit spread out here, but again, some more Hidden Creek, some cold water. 2027, here now we're getting 20 years where the east side reconstruction project is hitting that age again, and part of the challenge of this is to try to get yourself in the mindset of now this is 2027, so that's 9 years from now, so part of this is not thinking about what your roads look right now, but what are they going to look like in 9 years. Theoretically, in 9 years, our new reconstructed roads are gonna start looking like those first phases of Coldwater Crossing, you know, they're all kind of progressing along that same road, or that same path. All should be still in relatively good shape, but they're at that point where to really try to make sure that we're getting the maximum life out of that full road structure, that we look to do something. 2028, this is now the other one where, the west side of town here, where, you know, we've overlaid these roads, Second Street, Canary, Third, Fourth, Fifth, but, you know, if you can recall what the condition of those were when we overlaid them, they're in pretty tough shape. So at some point, now we put this out, again, 10 years from now, those overlays look pretty good right now. I guess, you know, that'll be something we just have to kind of continue to look at as to, you know, are we gonna get 10 years out of them? Maybe we can get more, maybe in a few years, they'll start that stuff that's underneath starts reflecting through, and we think we have to deal with it sooner than later. Again, just from a cost standpoint, we've started with, if you were going here, put in curb and gutter, do the storm sewer, reconstruct it, similar to what we did on the east side. Obviously more significant than just those mill and overlays that we've talked about. Next slide then is, now when all of this is going on, we're, you know, trying to address these roads that are getting older. You still then, you're gonna start introducing new pavements again, both with new developments, you know, Coldwater, 7th, Hidden Creek, 6th, and 7th. We'll have a Coldwater 8th coming in now, now these mill and overlays with new pavements that, theoretically, we're gonna wanna maintain those, and so you still have kind of your more routine maintenance of sealing cracks and doing seal coating along the way. I didn't break this down by year, but we've kind of laid out then, again, kind of following behind when we're getting new pavement into the system of a seal coat project, in the first few years after that's new. Then, the bad news is it's expensive. You know, again, you have 10 miles of road in town. If, you know, our estimate is, you know, $3.5 million to go through town and mill and overlay these roads at the appropriate time. You know, just kind of breaking it out, I think that there's actually 8 mill and overlay projects, so, you know, I just kind of, for just planning thought, you know, it's, you know, close to $400,000 a year that you'd be looking at to do that. The reconstruction projects, if we were to go on and reconstruct those roads to the same standard of other roads, curb and gutter, storm sewer, you know, that's potentially over $1 million worth of work to get those roads up to speed. And then again, you know, kind of keeping up with routine maintenance, you know, another close to $50,000 a year. Now, and we have, I think we put in 2% a year inflation when we were trying to figure these numbers. We've included some percentage for soft costs and contingencies. So I mean, they're really ballpark figures, but they're intended to be total project cost. But you know, again, this is kind of where you have to you know, start thinking about this, start planning for this, talk to your financial advisors how you do this. You know, the reconstruction projects, if that's what we did it consistent with other projects, you'd apply your assessment policy to that, and assess a portion of that to benefiting properties.
So mill and overlay, we usually don't assess.
Well, you could, generally the thought would be that that's still kind of considered maintenance. But it's a good question. Watertown's going through the same process right now where they've gone through, they did a reconstruction program over, 10, 12 years or whatever, and now they're kind of getting to the point where they're going back to those first years of those reconstructed roads, and they're doing mill and overlays. I think in their case, they don't assess that. Again, it's kind of considered a maintenance type of activity, but, you know, it's, again, the costs are significant, and and you gotta start thinking about either, one, if you agree that this is an appropriate course of action, how do we fund it? If not, what is Plan B?
And what about the trails and sidewalks, because a lot of the trails are looking
Yep, and you're right,
pretty bad.
that, we don't have those costs in there, but you're right, that's another, you have some other pavements, you have some parking lots, you have some trails, that we've done some sealing of in the past. You know, Coldwater and Hidden Creek have some, blacktop, we call them sidewalks, just 'cause of where they're located, but you have some pavements there too.
And we haven't done much on trails lately in the last 2 years, so.
No, and I remember, I mean, at least in Hidden Creek, it was seal coated once since I've lived here. And I remember it was a long time ago, there was discussion, among city council, I mean, it was years ago, about getting the trails on a rotation.
Yeah, there's been discussion of that.
And I don't,
Done in 2013, I believe, the product that was put down is on a 5-year rotation. It's 5 to 7 years ago, so it's the last.
Yeah.
yeah, the blacktop is,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, the blacktop itself, so.
We're gonna have to pay some attention to those also.
So this $392,900, is that, start, as of this year, we start putting that money away?
Well, so, when I was putting this together, I debated whether or not I should put years on this, or year 1, year 2, I mean, are these roads gonna fall apart in 2019 if you don't start where we said? Well, no, but I would say that we have a fairly short window on some of these where we don't wanna let them get too far down the road where we can't mill and overlay them anymore.
Conservatively.
Or that it's not cost effective to mill and overlay, but yeah.
Conservative for our plan, this should be something we should be looking at immediately.
Yep.
To fund road improvements.
Yep.
Maintenance.
Yep. And, if we're just, if where we're at in kind of your budget planning and your ability to kind of get this going right away, then maybe it needs to be 2020, but I would say that we should at least be having a discussion as to, if not next year, hopefully the year after that we either, figure out how to fund this plan, or figure out what the other plan is then, or what,
Because we'd have a pretty big project next year.
That
mill and
Coldwater,
overlay and that Coldwater.
Yep, that's a pretty significant chunk of pavement.
I think this rolls into nicely our conversation we were having earlier about the importance of preserving our roads and looking forward and getting some policies set around some of the construction. I think now when we see these numbers, and the importance of getting every year and every bit of life out of these roads we can get, it's important.
Yeah, and again, you look at those reconstructions, well, is that what has to be done? No. I would say at some point, it's not a mill and overlay. I think we have to take the pavement off and repave it. Does that mean you have to put in curb and gutter and storm sewer? Well, no. That's a policy decision you need to make.
At some point, we can't throw money at something that's not gonna fix it, that won't take care of it.
So, again, this is a tougher one just 'cause, you gotta work with your finance advisor and kind of figure out if you were to follow through on this plan, what's the appropriate way to pay for it.
It's reality, and it gets us where we, in the right direction. So, all right, any other questions for Dave on that? And again, thank you for putting that together. It's 6E1, Westridge Park amenities.
Okay, so this went back to the Park Commission because there was some misinterpretation on my part and on the quote that was given, unfortunately. And so when I went back to then purchase the equipment, it was, I'll show you, this document kind of looked like the quote that was given was kind of like they were giving us a reduction or like a discount. And lesson learned, I should have clarified. So this is the amount that we approved. Really, when I went back to talk to him, he said that was just, he understood why I interpreted it that way, but it was more, he was trying to show what it would look like if we didn't purchase that equipment. So what I did was I wanted to bring this back to the park commission quick, because I wanna at least get the equipment ordered this year yet before the the actual quote that's also provided in here is expired, and it's likely that cost will go up because a lot of construction, like steel and everything, is going up right now in price. So I brought it back to the park commission. I did explain the situation and the actual cost for the play equipment. With installation would be $66,812.14. What the park commission recommended to council is approving the equipment cost only, and the installation will be done next spring by Public Works. So it would be the equipment cost of $56,958.28. I know that there was a $50,000 budget, but we did kind of restructure our CIP for this year a little bit. We did move some projects to next year. That includes the archery range. The curbing in Old Schoolhouse Park came in a little lower than we expected. And then the ice rink we think will be around 10 to 20. We haven't gotten those costs in yet, so we're going to assess that at that time. But we would then pull a little extra, we were thinking, from the reserve fund to cover, because we do feel like the amenities in that park are very, like, all together would make a great park. Especially what we're looking at is to make it like an ADA compliant park. And so that was what was recommended by the park commission, is to keep that set of equipment together and to purchase it.
We approved $56,900.
You approved
No.
the 40
Oh,
originally,
40,000.
because we thought there was a discount that was given to us, but I guess that was a misinterpretation. So I wanted to bring it back to the.
So we thought we were getting all that equipment and installation for 40?
We did.
And that's exactly what it looked like. That's how we interpreted it on the park board. That's how city and council had interpreted it. That's how we.
Okay.
But
But the reality is it's now $56,000 with no installation.
correct.
Right.
What do you think the install cost will be for you guys to do it?
I'm not, until I get plans in front of me and stuff, I'm not sure what, our labor is already taken care of, but it's concrete work and then, digging the holes and stuff.
Doesn't have,
Something you can do, you guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you think it's close to this? I mean, 'cause if it's close to that,
$10,000, yeah.
You know, see, it's kinda, we could probably do it for, I'd say, half that cost for sure.
And-
Instead of get a ballpark.
And there was also discussion, since the Lions Club has adopted that park, that several of the Lions Club members could install or at least put together some of the equipment as well.
It'd be a matter of, if we approve the installation and purchase and everything, then it gets done this year for sure, you know, it'd be a time thing.
What kind of timeline do you think you have next year?
If we get a long fall, maybe we could put it in at the end of next fall, but otherwise we could probably put it in spring, would probably be my guess.
And then we always have the question, are we covered if volunteers come in and start setting
That was
up
my
equipment?
question, and.
Yeah, so the league does cover volunteering. We do have insurance over our volunteers.
so does that void any warranties if they don't install it?
We were concerned about that too. We thought, we do use them for our, they did an assessment of our parks this year, and they'll continue to do kind of like a seasonal review of our parks every year at a lower cost. This year was a larger cost because it was their first time, but then
We've been,
That didn't really answer my
we
question.
felt that we would then have them come and just review it after.
we can have them come do an inspection.
Well, they can come through and but does that void the warranty is what I'm asking. So if something does is it, next year it says does it void the warranty?
If it was installed properly.
Yeah, I agree with Kyle on that.
Is that something we can call and ask them?
Yeah.
Or if we do the install, will this void the warranty on the product?
For me, if it does, I would lean towards having them install it at the 9,000.
And those are the two questions I had, too, is were we covered and what the warranty?
Seems, for me, I'd like to table this so I can get further information, but if someone wants to make a motion, I'll
We could
certainly
maybe
entertain
do
that.
the equipment approval and then, cause they're separate quotes, the installation quote is separate than the
Oh, so get
Then
it,
equipment,
someone wants to,
Are these two separate companies, there's Flagship and Landscape?
No, they're kind of, one's kind of an umbrella over the other.
yeah, I think one acquired the other, did
Right,
it not?
right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
My only thing is I feel like it's the same story every year. We have all these great intentions with the park board and nothing ever gets done this year. I swear. It just, I just feel like this stockpile of money that we have, this 300 some money that's just sitting in the park board, like.
Well, it's there, they'll take it out when they get the project done, that's what they're doing this year, they're dipping
Well, I
into
feel like
what they had.
we're always doing that, always. So I would be open to doing the full quote.
You making a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. Can I do it two-sided though? Well, no, like where it's, no, 'cause if I want it to go through
Okay.
and do what we were saying, like the installation part separate if it voids the
So
warranty.
you can make a motion to
I
just
don't know how to-
purchase the equipment at $56,958 and 28 cents, and we'll figure out installation. I mean, we can make that motion at a different meeting.
You can do installation pending conditions.
If you're doing that, you might as well just make it for the full amount, because if we buy the equipment and we decide it voids the warranty, then what are you gonna do? Then it happens. So I would
I
make
mean,
a
in 2
motion that we
weeks-
table it until we make a phone call and find out if it voids the warranty or not.
I don't mind purchasing it, and next meeting, bringing back the installation at 9,000 too. It doesn't matter. Whatever motion someone wants to make.
I'm not really sure why.
The quote ends
Expired.
expires in October, and when that quote expires, my understanding is that because of steel costs, just from what I've heard, that the price will likely go up for materials.
Now, we've looked at these pieces before, how much have they gone up in the last 2 years?
Well, we haven't looked at these pieces in the last 2 years. No, the pieces that we've looked at before are installed, or we've purchased and we have them, so these are newer ones.
You motion to table it, I'm gonna second that.
A motion to table it, we have a second. Any further discussion?
So I mean, do we have the time at the next meeting to make a decision, to actually order it, at least get it ordered, and maybe get it in?
I don't know. He just said it's very time sensitive with winter coming, so, it just kinda depends. So, I know the park commission discussed that, and they just said, if we have to purchase it and store it until spring, that's just kinda what's gonna have to happen, so.
At worst, it could purchase and store it.
All right, we have a motion and a second to table it. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Aye. Motion fails. Someone like to make another motion?
I'll make a motion to approve, the purchase of the equipment and then how do I word the installation?
So you can table that, you can just say, wait or table the installation portion until the next meeting when we can get more information on warranty. 'Cause they're separate, like the,
So if you're,
Do we have
so
one?
if you're gonna make a
Well,
motion.
no, I mean, I'll make a
you
motion
might as well
for the
make
whole
it
thing,
For the whole thing,
the
because
66.
tying our hands to, if we had to anyways, it has to,
Yep.
to not say potentially half by having a volunteer or.
I'll make a motion to purchase with installation for $66,812.40.
I'll second.
Second motion, second, any further discussion? I don't know if I agree with that. I think waiting on the installation's no problem. Waiting 2 more weeks on that, get an answer.
I like the way.
Now we're saying we're installing it no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
If the warranty's voided, anything, well, no, they'll install it. So we're not even gonna take the option. I think we should be. All right, that's the motion for, we have a motion second for $66,812, including installation. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. So motion fails. Correct, Eric, you were a nay?
Yes.
Motion fails. Any other motions we'd like to make? I'll make a motion to purchase the equipment for $56,958.28.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We got there. And then Maggie, you'll come back with the installation costs at the next meeting?
Yep.
Or if there's warranty void?
Yep.
All right, thank you. That'll take us to 6E2, Old Schoolhouse Park Playground curbing.
All right. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, a motion approving the installation of curbing in Old Schoolhouse Park attached to the quote from Thomas Clementson Concrete and Masonry for the installation of curbing in Old Schoolhouse Park. Park Board has reviewed the request and is recommending the city council accept the bid for Old Schoolhouse Park curbing in the amount of $4,392. This is included in the Park Board capital outlay item in 2018. Public Works staff will excavate and prep the area for concrete prior to installation and will also install additional drain tile to keep the park from flooding during a rain event. The additional materials needed, the Class 5 and the drain tile, will cost about $600, bringing the total cost of the project to $4,992. City council can expect the park to be closed between 2 to 4 weeks depending on weather. The city has installed this type of curbing in Discovery Park in 2016 and Westridge Park in 2017. The park board and city staff have been very pleased with the product overall, and we have received numerous comments on it. We budgeted in the capital outlay item, we have $6,820 budgeted.
Motion to, accept the Clementson bid of $4,390 to install curbing in Old Schoolhouse Park.
We have a motion, a second, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Tom. That'll take us to G1, Minnesota Services Cleaning Contract.
So, I know at the last,
All right.
at the last meeting, or I think 2 meetings ago, staff was directed to kind of clean up the contract, and, I think there was some confusion on kind of the 2-week, 3-week.
But that doesn't really matter now that we've got.
Right, so I know it complicates things now that we did receive our, it complicates things because Kids Company is no longer going to be here in the summer, and they're also not going to be here during the year. So, I don't know if it's worth keeping it in there for now or taking it out, or I mean, we might even not even need 2 days per week now for everything.
Well, how often was the previous cleaners cleaning it?
They were with Kids Company here. They were here as this contract is written. So they were here 2 full days through during the week, and then as needed, and then they were here kind of just to do general basic cleaning during the summer when Kids Company was here.
I don't think it's unreasonable to have someone come in twice a week.
Yeah.
I don't either. I don't think.
Well, it is being used because we got employees here.
What about events, like who cleans
Yeah,
up after the event?
they would come in as needed, which is kind of part of what we would have to review as.
And would
you
they
know,
even
if-
want to still have a contract with us since it's not a guaranteed?
Right. Yeah.
Do you know how many times Clementon came in with before Kids Company?
I don't know that. 2? Okay. But one thing you have to know is that we don't really know how much he came in because he came in, I think, more than he billed us for. So I think he was very, very local, like.
Do we still need the 2 days, or?
I think we could do 1 and then as needed. We definitely for those weekend events like weddings and other larger events, I definitely agree with that. I don't know, Kyle could maybe shed light. We can shed light on what we've been doing, but I know Kyle has been doing like the major cleaning of the community center.
Yeah, I'd be fine.
It's kind of the point now where I think some areas twice isn't bad. The offices twice a week, and the restrooms twice a week isn't bad.
Mhm.
Now the gym, I get, we probably don't need that done twice a week, so. No,
People coming in and doing the homeschooling?
They haven't been this summer, but they might.
And they weren't going to over the summer, I thought.
Okay, yeah. And theirs was once or twice a month?
We're right back.
Well, they're requesting
Yeah.
every Thursday now, but.
Okay.
Is this company gonna even want to have a contract with us if we're only once a week and as needed?
Oh, you don't ask.
They probably won't.
Yeah.
Could you go back and just ask them one more, see what they will do, and then we gotta get this resolved.
Yeah.
This can't go on for 2 years either, so.
Yep.
I mean, things obviously change now with Kids Company, so, go back to them again and see what they're considering, maybe half of it twice a week and maybe not the entire thing, and see if they can adjust, see what they can do.
Okay.
We may not have, we may be at the point where they say no, and we have no choice. All right, is everyone okay with that, taking it back?
Yep, we pay you guys.
All right, any other business?
No, sir.
No. Any, council reports?
A lot of excitement about the potential internet and open house.
Yeah.
Whenever I'm walking around, people are saying they can't have it, so it's
There's a lot of talk, that's everyone's, Tice, any?
No, I think we have EDA tomorrow.
Except, I have to figure out exact. I'm getting people dropping, so I will let you guys know early in the morning, so.
Nikki, anything?
Mm-mm.
No. Liz? No. I don't have anything either. Look for a motion to adjourn. A motion with.
A second.
A motion, second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.